For the benefit of the audience and the witnesses, generally, and in this case too, Senator Feinstein is the ranking member for this hearing, and she and I will make opening comments. Then we'll go to our first panel. This committee continues to honor its pledge to conduct oversight over the implementation of the laws Congress has passed, as well as the policies of the executive branch. Today, we will focus on how this committee's immigration policies and practices are hurting American families. The committee will hear powerful testimony from a number of relatives who have lost loved ones as a direct result of the administration's failure to deport aliens or its tolerance of sanctuary policies. I'll begin by extending a special welcome to our witnesses, especially family members of victims. I hope you will accept our deepest sympathies for the losses each of you have suffered. Thank you very much for your willingness to share your stories under difficult circumstances and to pay tribute to those who, though no longer with us in body, are surely with us in spirit. Today we will honor Josh, Kate, Dennis, Danny, Grant, and many others whose lives were tragically cut short because of the administration's lax immigration policies. We had many families and relatives who wanted to testify today, but unfortunately we had to turn them away because we were limited in time and space. However, we welcome all testimony for the record and encourage them to commemorate their loved ones with stories and written letters to this committee. We will examine the administration's policies from top down. We'll look at how federal benefits are being granted to deportable criminals by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, while criminals are being released by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and how enforcement of the laws can be better achieved. We will look at how we can improve cooperation between government agencies, and we'll look into how we can improve cooperation between the federal government and state and local law enforcement agencies. After all, we all work for the same taxpayer. We ought to be cooperating. We'll look at sanctuary jurisdictions and try to understand why policies protect criminal aliens are in place. In the past few weeks, we have learned that there are thousands of detainers placed each year on by federal agents on undocumented immigrants with criminal records that are ignored. According to government data, between January and September 2014, there were 8,811 declined detainers in 276 counties, 43 states, including Columbia District. Of the 8,811 declined detainers, 62% were associated with over 5,000 individuals who were previously charged or convicted of a crime or presented some other public safety concern. And nearly 1,900 of the released offenders were arrested for another crime after being released by sanctuary jurisdiction. This is obviously disturbing, not only to me, but to most Americans. There is no good rationale for non-cooperation between federal level and state and local law enforcement. Public safety is needlessly and recklessly put at risk when state and local officials provide sanctuary to law-abiding immigrants just to make a political point. This administration, in too many cases, has turned a blind eye to enforcement, even releasing thousands of criminals at its own discretion, many of whom have gone on to commit serious crimes, including murder. The administration has also granted deferred action to criminal aliens who have committed heinous crimes after receiving this relief from deportation. I've written to Secretary Johnson about 4 specific cases in which such individuals have received President Obama's deferred action for childhood arrivals, and that is referred to as DACA in this town. One of these beneficiaries was a known gang member when he applied and received DACA, then went on to kill 4 people in North Carolina. Another DACA recipient used his work authorization to gain employment at a popular youth camp in California, where he was recently arrested for child molestation and distribution of child pornography. I'm still waiting for responses on some of these cases. Further, the administration has completely failed to do anything about sanctuary cities, all while challenging states that took a more aggressive approach to enforcing immigration laws. I recently sent a letter to Attorney General Lynch and Homeland Security Secretary Johnson about sanctuary cities. I urge them to take control of the situation to ensure detainers are not ignored and undocumented individuals are safely transferred to federal custody and put into deportation proceedings. I implored them to take a more direct role in the matter, and on those letters I have not received a response. But this isn't a new issue for this administration. I wrote to then Secretary Napolitano and then Attorney General Holder 2012 and asked them to intervene in Cook County, Illinois, and other sanctuary jurisdictions. Nothing happened. In fact, since then, the administration officials have publicly stated that they neither believe detainers have to be honored nor that they even want them to be mandatory. Enforcing the immigration laws in this country is not a voluntary or trivial matter. Real lives are at stake. Things cannot continue this way. We're a nation based upon the rule of law, and if that rule of law isn't respected, only chaos will succeed. That is why I'm introducing legislation today that will hold sanctuary jurisdictions accountable. It will require the executive branch to withhold certain federal funding if states or local law enforcement refuse to cooperate with federal government in holding and transferring criminal aliens. My bill will require that state and local cooperate on criminal aliens or risk losing law enforcement related grants that are distributed by Homeland Security and DOJ. My bill will also require mandatory minimum 5-year prison sentence in addition to possible fine for individuals who enter the United States after having been deported. Current law does not require prison time and caps the possible prison sentence at 2 years. This section of my bill is aimed at individuals who ignore our laws time and again. No more people should die at the hands of those who break our laws just by being here. No more families should have to go through what these families and others have gone through. Again, I'd like to thank our witnesses for taking the time to be with us today. Your strength and determination to change the unacceptable status quo won't go unnoticed. I will now turn to Senator Feinstein, and after she does, I'll introduce the witnesses.
Thank you very much, Chairman Grassley. I want to say that our ranking member, Patrick Leahy, would be here, but there's an urgent family appointment that he had to keep this morning. And so I sit in his stead, and I know this is a hearing that he very much would have wanted to have attended. Yesterday, I had occasion to meet with the Steinle family, and Jim Steinle is sitting front and center at the dock. And what I saw was a very hurt family, but very resolute and very concerned about doing the right thing, whatever that may be in a case like this. So I want to voice my very clear sympathy and condolences to the family members that are here today. I can't think of anything that's harder to do than what you're going to do today. And I think your strength in doing it is noted and very much appreciated. It is very clear to me that we have to improve cooperation between local, state, and federal law enforcement. The overriding concern and a deep belief of mine is that convicted felons should be removed from the country, but not released onto our streets. When immigration authorities ask that a state or local law enforcement agency notify them of an impending release of an alien with a serious felony record, that request should be honored. I strongly believe that local law enforcement should have notified the immigration authorities in the case of the accused murderer of Kate Steinle. The man who killed Kate is a classic case of multiple felonies and prior deportations, and a simple phone call would have been enough. But that did not happen. In fact, the San Francisco County Sheriff adopted his own policy on March of 2015, just 4 months ago. The memo states, SFSD staff shall not provide the following information or access to ICE representatives, end quote. One of the items listed in the department's memo is, quote, release dates and times, end quote. In other words, the Sheriff's Department barred its own deputies from informing ICE about an individual's release date and time. That, I believe, is wrong. I believe it is not required by San Francisco's ordinance, as the mayor has made clear to the sheriff in a letter dated July 14th. And, Mr. Chairman, I would like to put that letter in the record, if I may.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I agree with the mayor, and to prevent a similar tragedy, I hope and expect that my home state of California and the city of San Francisco in particular will agree to take part in the Department of Homeland Security Priority Enforcement Program, known as PEP. This program focuses on felons and others who are high priorities for removal from the country. Under PEP, ICE can request notification of an alien's release date from state or local custody, and so that they would have the opportunity, if the circumstances warrant it, to take custody of that individual itself. In some instances, PEP also allows for ICE to lodge a detainer request with local law enforcement, asking that they hold an alien for up to 48 hours. It seems to me that a simple notification to ICE could have prevented Kate Steinle's death. I have urged Mayor Lee and the Board of Supervisors to participate in this new program, which the Secretary announced late last year. This program prioritizes those who threaten our nation's national security. I'm pleased that Mayor Lee is taking this request seriously and is in the process of communicating with the Department of Homeland Security about participating. We all know that most undocumented immigrants are otherwise law-abiding, hardworking, and just want to provide for their families. I believe that deeply. But that's not the element of the undocumented population we're talking about today. I'm currently working on a bill, as is our chairman and I think others in this committee, that would require state and local law enforcement to notify Immigration and Customs Enforcement of the impending release from a detention center of an illegal alien who has previously been convicted of a felony, if ICE requests such notification. This bill is a work in progress, and Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing the testimony today and to working with other members of this committee so that we might produce a bill that is worthy of consideration and passage. And I thank the chair.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Our first witness, Ms. Susan Oliver. Ms. Oliver is a widow of Deputy Danny Oliver, a police officer, Sacramento. Danny was killed while on duty by an undocumented immigrant who was previously arrested on 2 separate occasions on drug-related charges and twice deported. Ms. Oliver has established a foundation in her husband's name to help kids in school. Our second witness, Ms. Grace Wang, she is Public Policy Program Coordinator for Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, a nonprofit network of domestic violence founded in 1990. Our third witness, Mr. Michael Rohnbeck, the uncle of Grant Rohnbeck. He was a 21-year-old convenience store clerk who was gunned down earlier this year by an undocumented immigrant. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement released Grant's alleged murderer who was awaiting deportation. Grant was born in Iowa, but resided in Arizona and had two brothers and a sister. Our fourth witness, the Reverend Gabriel Salguero. Reverend Salguero and his wife are the co-lead pastors of Lamb's Church of the Nazarene, New York City. He is also founder of the National Latino Evangelical Coalition. Our fifth witness, Mr. Jim Steinle of Pleasanton, California, the father of Kate Steinle, who was gunned down 20 days ago while walking on a pier in San Francisco alongside this father. Her alleged killer had 7 prior felony convictions and had been deported 5 times. Sanchez was shielded by San Francisco's sanctuary policy, which allowed for his release in March despite an ICE detainer placed on him. 6th-person Chief J. Thomas Manger. Chief Manger has been a chief of police Montgomery County since February 2004. Chief Manger also serves as president of the Major Cities Chiefs Association. Our 7th witness is Dr. Brian McCann. Mr. McCann's brother, Dennis, was killed in 2011 by a drunk driver who was in the country illegally and driving without a license. U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement had placed a detainer on the drunk driver, but he was released under Cook County, Illinois' sanctuary city policies. Our final witness, Miss Laura Wilkerson of Pier, Texas. She's a mother of Josh Wilkerson. Josh was 18 years old when he was kidnapped and murdered by his high school classmates, an illegal immigrant, after offering his classmate a ride from school. Josh's murderer was sentenced to life imprisonment and will be eligible for parole in 30 years. I want to thank all of you for being here, and as I express to you privately our condolences, I say so now publicly. You're very brave to come forward in testimony, and we welcome that very much. We'll start with Ms. Oliver. I know you folks have been told about a 4-minute rule. The red light comes on. If you have a longer statement, it'll be put in the record. That doesn't mean that just exactly when the red light comes on, I'm going to gavel you down, but please cut it short because this is a very important hearing. We want to get the witnesses in, but the most important thing after you tell your stories is for us to hear from the administration and to question the administration. Will you start, Ms. Oliver?
Good morning. I just wanted to first state that I'm honored that the bill has been named after my husband, Deputy Oliver, as well as Detective Davis, who were killed on October 24, 2014. Over the past 9 months, my life has changed dramatically because of the loss of my husband, Sacramento County Sheriff Deputy Danny Oliver. Danny Oliver was a special person that knew that treating people with dignity and kindness resulted in stronger, healthier, and safer communities, and he worked every day to help make that a reality for communities that needed it the most. As a 15-year veteran of Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, Danny Oliver was not a man to boast or gloat of his professional accomplishments. In fact, when he was given a standing ovation at a community meeting, he felt unsure of how to handle this overwhelming approval. Danny simply felt he was doing his job, and that was all that was needed to feel accomplished. My husband's last shift with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office ended by doing something he had done countless times before in his career. He was policing his community and trying to make a difference. Danny was a POP officer, also known as a problem-oriented policing officer. His job was to identify possible community challenges and try to get ahead of them. He put himself into harm's way every day that he put his uniform on. And on Friday, October 24, 2014, my husband and father of two approached a car on his beat. But this time it was the last time. The last thing my husband attempted to do as a POP officer was to ask the man inside the car how his day was going. But he never made it to the driver's window. At about 10:30 a.m., that man was in the country illegally and armed with numerous illegal weapons. He aimed one outside the car of a parking lot of Motel 6 in Sacramento and opened fire, killing my husband with a shot to the forehead. I can honestly say that not a day goes by that this has not affected me. It may not be visible always. It may not be written in bold for all to see. It may not even be recognized, but it's always in the background of my mind. Sorry. It's there daily, sometimes moment by moment, as it should be. Many people ask if I've gotten past that terrible day, and the answer is no. Honestly, I don't think I will ever get past that day. I lost the man I was married to for 25 years. Each day I look for parental backup for rearing my child, who's 12 years old, and I feel that loss. Each day my children reach milestones. My daughter recently got engaged, and there will be a marriage that he will not be at. There'll be school graduations and even our weekly family brunches that we held. I am reminded that I no longer have my husband by my side. I was with him since I graduated high school 25 years ago, and we watched each other grow up. We made careers together, and we raised two children. We could just look at each other and know what we needed. Perhaps it was support, a loving smile, or even, I'll talk to you when we get home look. It is hard to build this trust and understanding, but we had it mastered with ease. But because of the actions of one criminal, this all ended on October 24th. My life will never be the same. Unlike law enforcement, there are few professions that consistently send our loved ones into harm's way. It's frightening, always knowing that each time they walk out the door, it could be the last time that you see them. At the same time, not many professions consciously or intentionally give the order to take a life through the use of deadly force in order to protect others who can't protect themselves. An awesome responsibility that my husband understood clearly. And this continues to create a lot of ongoing dialogue within communities throughout the country as we see a lack of continuity among law enforcement groups and communities that they serve. Every single day, law enforcers at the state, local, and federal level put themselves, their loved ones, and their communities that they serve at risk when they are forced to release criminals who are illegal, who pose a threat to community safety, all in violation of current laws that require deportation. In just the last 2 years, ICE released back into the nation's streets 76,000 convicted criminals who were in this country illegally. There are 169 criminals in the United States who are here illegally right now. That means there are 169,000 people in our streets who have criminal convictions and were formally and lawfully ordered deported, but who remain here to commit other crimes, to possibly kill someone else's loved one. The administration's tolerance of sanctuary cities has also resulted in another 10,000 potentially deported illegal immigrant criminals being released by local law agencies since January of last year. And 121 of these criminals have been ordered deported in the last few years, and yet were released by ICE, have now been charged with additional homicide offenses. The man that killed my husband, Danny Oliver, was deported several times for various felonies before killing my husband on October 24, 2014. However, due to the lack of coordination between law enforcement agencies. He was allowed back into the country, and in one day, he committed another crime. Only this time, his illegal crime status impacted many in a direct and profound way when he shot and killed my husband. It would be remiss if I didn't also mention that it wasn't just my life that was changed that day. That same criminal eluded hundreds of officers from Sacramento to Auburn, California, during a 6-hour crime spree that also left Placer County Sheriff Detective Michael David Davis, Jr. dead, Placer County Sheriff Deputy Jeff Davis wounded, and a motorist in serious condition from a gunshot to the head. Many lives changed on October 24th. Today, I honor my husband, Sacramento County Sheriff Deputy Danny Oliver, and the other fallen heroes throughout this nation who are always with us in our hearts and in our memories. I wonder if I would even be here today talking to you about my loss if the government better enforced immigration law. Unfortunately, this is now my reality. Thank you for honoring Danny and the others who have made the ultimate sacrifice. I hope by being here today and telling you about the grief my family has unnecessarily endured, I can help save the life of someone else's friend, husband, or father. I hope that my husband's death won't be in vain. I hope that I can be here to make a difference. My life is forever changed and saddened. Please help put policy in place to make sure that criminal immigrants who are in this country illegally are never allowed to dictate the life of a true humanitarian like my husband, Deputy Danny Oliver.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Ms. Wang?
Thank you, Chairman Grassley and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Grace Wong from the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I am deeply honored to be here to comment on the impact of local law enforcement policies regarding federal immigration enforcement on victims of domestic violence. The issue of violence in our communities is challenging, complex, and deeply emotional. As someone who's worked with survivors of violent crimes for over 22 years, I know how important it is for people to feel that they can prevent future tragedies, and I want to extend my heartfelt condolences to the families here today. Over the years in my work at the Coalition, I've had the honor to work in helping families work in the advocacy process in advancing effective policy solutions. Through open and honest dialogue, I hope that we can work to find solutions that make our communities safer for everyone. One crucial thing we can do is to build strong police and community relationships, which means establishing an environment of trust. If victims and witnesses do not feel safe coming forward, the police cannot do their jobs, and we are all less safe. Congress has affirmed that principle that immigrant victims and witnesses should feel safe to come forward by creating the U visa for victims of crime in 2000 in the Violence Against Women Act, which was recently reauthorized. I thank you all for everything you have done to make women in our communities as a whole more safe. I ask that you remember these lessons as you work to address this new challenge. As a victim advocate, I'm deeply concerned that mandating local police cooperation with immigration enforcement will strengthen the hands of violent perpetrators, helping them silence their victims and witnesses. I'm also concerned that vulnerable immigrant victims brave enough to step forward will face detention, separation from their children, and swift deportation. This was what many communities encountered with secure communities, and the chilling effect it had on police-community relations was both dramatic and counterproductive. One example of this chilling effect is the case of Cecilia, a young Guatemalan girl living in Colorado. Cecilia was sexually abused by a family friend at the age of 5. Her parents, who were undocumented, were terrified of reporting the crime to the police after having been told by friends and family that they would be reported to immigration if they stepped forward. A year later, that same perpetrator sexually abused another child. In the end, after the father of that child contacted Cecilia's parents, they went to the police together and the perpetrator was caught and prosecuted. But because of their initial fear to report, another child was harmed. When immigrants are afraid to come forward with information about a crime, the entire community is less safe. When reaching out to police to address domestic violence may end up in deportation, law enforcement is effectively removed as an option for safety, which has life-threatening impacts. For example, one client, Maria, so distrusted the police that when her abuser tracked her down after she fled to another state, she tried to call her lawyer instead of calling 911. It was midnight, he was pounding on the door, and she was frantically calling over and over the closed office of her attorney, who was, of course, not at work. For Maria, the idea of calling the police was simply not an option that put her life in danger. Imagine being so fearful that even though somebody is trying to break into your house, you cannot turn to the police. As victim advocates, we are also concerned that immigrant survivors will be caught up in deportation cases when there are mandates for local police cooperation with ICE. It's not unusual for immigrant victims to be convicted of crimes stemming from their victimization. For example, in California, Cindy, a Taiwanese woman on a student visa, was arrested and convicted of felony domestic violence charges and spent nearly a month in jail before she was able to speak to somebody in her own language. She had bitten her abuser while fighting him off when he tried to rape her. Although the jury determined that she had acted to defend herself, she was convicted of felony domestic violence because the jury determined that the force she used to defend herself was greater than the assault. Because Cindy was not automatically referred to ICE, she was able to complete her studies, expunge her criminal record, and become a productive member of society. Policies limiting local police cooperation with ICE may provide just enough respite for victims like Cindy to access the resources they need. Again, I want to say that we in the domestic violence advocacy field greatly appreciate the work that Congress has done, and many members of this committee in particular have done to support a coordinated community response to domestic violence. Proposals that are under consideration now to limit funds to so-called sanctuary cities will allow violent crimes to go uninvestigated and leave victims without redress. Federal funding of law enforcement supports critical training, equipment, and staff that assist victims all over the country every day. Without such funding, there will be cases that go uninvestigated, protection orders that will not be served or enforced, rape kits that will not be tested, the child abuse, sexual abuse victims that will not have trained interviewers. These victims are not limited to immigrants. We recognize the fact that there are victims, both with lawful status and those without, that are harmed by some immigrants. We all want justice for victims and to prevent future crimes. We urge Congress to proceed with measured, thoughtful policies in order to enhance the safety of all of our communities. Thank you.
Good morning, distinguished committee members. Grant Ronnebeck was a 21-year-old son, brother, nephew, and grandson. He was a bright young man with an infectious smile and love of life. He had a positive outlook on life, and everyone he met knew it. Grant had no enemies. He was a friendly, outgoing, lovable guy. As a 21-year-old American, he was just starting out in life, starting to realize his dreams, starting to follow his heart in matters of career choices, and just discovering his life's opportunities. His desire was to work his way up at the job he loved, working for the Quick Trip Corporation, as he had for the previous 5 years, or possibly later to become a member of the law enforcement community. He loved four-wheeling in the desert around his home near Mesa, Arizona, spending time with friends and family, and watching the Broncos play during the football season. He was a pretty typical young American man, but to us he was a very special family and community member. At 4 a.m. on January 22, 2015, just 6 months ago, while working the overnight shift at his Quick Trip store, Grant assisted a man buying cigarettes. The man dumped a jar of coins on the counter and demanded those cigarettes. Grant tried to explain that he needed to count the coins before he could give the man the cigarettes. The man pulled a gun and said, "You're not going to take my money and you're not going to give me my cigarettes." Grant immediately offered up the cigarettes to the man, who shot him point blank in the face, killing him. Seemingly unaffected, the man coldly and callously stepped over Grant's dying body, grabbed a couple of packs of cigarettes, and then left the store. After a 30-minute high-speed pursuit through the streets of Mesa and Phoenix, Arizona, the man was taken into custody. Inside his car were the cigarettes and 2 handguns, one of which was believed to have been used to kill Grant. Apolinar Altamirano, the alleged murderer, is an illegal alien. According to a news article detailing his 2012 arrest, he was a self-proclaimed member of the Mexican Mafia and says he has ties to the Sinaloan drug cartel. The news article states that in August of 2012, he was arrested with 2 others after kidnapping and sexually assaulting a woman and burglarizing her apartment. She was allegedly held naked and against her will for a full week prior to escaping. He took a plea deal and pled guilty to a charge of felony burglary for that incident. He was sentenced to 2 years probation and turned over to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency due to his undocumented status in the United States. He never served any time in custody related to that offense. ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, released the now convicted felon Altamirano on a $10,000 bond pending a deportation hearing. In the 2 years since then, while awaiting his deportation hearing, Altamirano has had 2 orders of protection filed against him, including one from a woman who claimed he threatened to kill her and pointed a gun at her boyfriend. ICE was reportedly notified of the protection orders by a Mesa Superior Court judge. Altamirano was still allowed to remain free in our country. In addition to Altamirano, ICE reported that they released 66,564 other criminal aliens back onto the streets of our country in 2013 and 2014, and another 10,246 as of March 2015. This group included aliens convicted of violent and serious crimes, including homicide, sexual assault, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. At least 123 American citizens have been murdered by one of these released criminal aliens, including my nephew, Grant Roundaback. There are a number of immigration bills that have been introduced in the last several months. Among those, Grant's Law for my nephew, Kate's Law for Kate Steinle, the Davis-Oliver Act for law enforcement officers Danny Oliver and Michael Davis, and Jamil's Law for Jamil Shaw, all Americans killed by illegal immigrants. Each of these potential laws have a specific component that would help protect American lives. I ask that each of you give consideration and priority to passing these important bills into laws. It is my family's greatest desire that Grant Roundaback's legacy will be more than a fading obituary, a cemetery plot, or a fond memory. Instead, we want Grant's death to be a force for change and reform in the immigration policies of this great nation. In closing, I am asking you, our elected leaders, scholars, lawyers, to make these changes, to rise above your political differences, to set aside your personal interests, and to use your resources to make sensible immigration reform a reality in the coming months, with the safety and security of American citizens first and foremost in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Rodenbeck. Now, Reverend Salguero.
My name is Gabriel Salguero. Together with my wife, Jeanette, I am the pastor of the multi-ethnic Lamb's Church of the Nazarene, where immigrants, police officers, whites, African Americans, and Asians worship together. I'm also the founder of the National Latino Evangelical Coalition, which represents some of the 8 million Hispanic evangelicals living in the United States. I offer my sincere thanks to Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein, and the other members of the committee. I'm honored to be here today. I want to begin by saying that I'm heartbroken by the senseless violence and tragedy that we are discussing here today. I've prayed and asked the Lord to bless these families and provide grace and comfort to each family member here today. I can only imagine that every family member, friend, and community member continues to reel from the shock, loss, and grief at the remembrance of these lost loved ones. My prayers and sincere condolences go to each of you and your families. Nothing I can do here today will heal that grief, but your families will remain in my prayers. I pray for an end to violent acts such as these, and I pray that those who would commit such acts face just consequences and redemption. I'm here to speak about my belief that we should take care to ensure that while we work to prevent these tragedies from occurring in the future, we do not harm entire communities in the process. Faith organizations, including my evangelical community, have historically played a critical role in promoting community trust and providing safe haven to refugees, those fleeing violence, and other immigrants facing daunting challenges of opportunity in the United States. I do not believe that the tragedies we discussed here today are the result of policies that seek to promote trust and cooperation with immigrant communities. The values of sanctuary churches in the United States are deeply rooted in safety, family unity, and trust. These values are critical in the promotion of healthy, vibrant, and nonviolent communities. And they are the foundation of hundreds of communities across the country who have chosen to embrace local law enforcement policies that foster and protect trust. These policies should be designed to prevent dangerous crimes, not encourage them. In the midst of our collective grief, I pray we avoid criminalizing or casting collective blame on entire communities for the actions committed by one or even a small number of individuals. In order to uphold our criminal justice system and ensure that our communities feel safe enough to come forward and interact with law enforcement, cities across the United States need to work on their role in collaborating with federal immigration authorities and in the use of immigration detainers in an effort to ensure that both survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, and other serious crimes will cooperate with law enforcement and come forward. If we fail to create smart policies that promote trust, victims and witnesses will remain silent due to their fear that they or their loved ones face deportation after seeking protection from the police. Silence can create fear and expose all communities to greater risk. We as a nation should focus on solutions that will make our communities more integrated and, yes, more safe. I believe that legislation targeting immigrant communities will just lead to more crime, as it may silence many of the more than 11 million immigrants who will fear cooperation with police at the risk of deportation. I urge Congress to resist politicizing the murders and the grief of these families with sweeping measures and to instead work with local communities and churches and others to ensure community safety. Let's work together to reform our immigration laws. Faith communities should work to keep families safe, to keep families together, and to keep children with their parents. Faith communities should not permit our grief to turn us against each other or against entire communities. Yes, our immigration system is broken and it needs reform. But we should not move forward with reactionary legislation that does not address the real issues at hand. The real solution to our immigration challenges is broad, just, and humane immigration reform, which would place undocumented immigrants on an earned path to citizenship, get many people on the rolls. That way we know who the criminals are and who isn't, allowing them to also, those hardworking immigrants, to contribute to their families, communities, and country. As a pastor, I want to avoid scapegoating entire communities by passing legislation that focuses solely on deportation and not on integrating hardworking families in the United States. So let's work together to promote community safety. We can and should look at state and local policies carefully. I encourage communities to carefully tailor their policies to keep people safe. I encourage the federal government to carefully review its own policies and work with these localities across the country to ensure that our systems appropriately meet the goals of violence prevention against all community members. But I do not encourage us to force states and localities to pursue one-size-fits-all policies. As we continue to mourn and pray for these families, let's work together to find real solutions that promote peace and security, not fear and not collective punishment. I pray for an end to senseless acts of violence. I pray for every policymaker here and beyond to make rational and deliberate decisions. I pray for reform that promotes thoughtful community safety policies, immigration integration, and common sense, comprehensive immigration reform. I pray for the comfort of each of the families speaking here today and those who are not here. And I thank you again for inviting me here today.
Reverend Salguero. Now, Mr. Steinle.
First of all, on behalf of my family, I would like to thank the members of this committee for the honor to speak to you about our daughter, Kate. All children are special in their own way, and Kate was special in the way she connected with people. We call it the Kate effect. Kate was beautiful, kind, happy, caring, loving, and deep in faith. Kate had a special soul, a kind and giving heart, the most contagious laugh, and a smile that would light up a room. Kate loved to travel, spend time with her friends, and most of all, spend time with her family. In fact, the day she was killed, we were walking arm in arm on Pier 14 in San Francisco, enjoying a wonderful day together. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Kate fell and looked at me and said, "Help me, Dad." Those are the last words I will ever hear from my daughter. The day Kate died, she changed her Facebook cover photo to a saying that said, "Whatever's good for your soul, do it." That truly describes Kate's spirit. After graduating from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, she went to work for a title company and saved her money so she could see the world. She traveled to Spain, Thailand, Amsterdam, Dubai, South Africa, just to mention a few. She even made her way to the slums of Dubai, India, to reach out to friends, mothers, and nanny. She spent time there with the woman's family and came back a changed person. Everywhere Kate went throughout the world, she shined the light of a good citizen of the United States of America. Unfortunately, due to disjointed laws and basic incompetence on many levels, the U.S. has suffered a self-inflicted wound in the murder of our daughter by the hand of a person that should have never been on the streets of this country. I say this because the alleged murderer is an undocumented immigrant who has been convicted of 7 felonies in the U.S. and already deported 5 times. Yet in March of this year, he was released from jail and allowed to stay here freely because of those legal loopholes. It's unbelievable to see so many innocent Americans that have been killed by undocumented immigrant felons in the recent years. In fact, we recently come across a statistic that says between 2010 and 2014, 121 criminal aliens who had an active deportation case at the time of release were subsequently charged with homicide-related offenses. Think about that. 121 times over the past 4 years, an illegal immigrant with prior criminal convictions that later went on to be charged with murder when they should have been deported. That is 1 every 12 days. Our family realized the complexity of immigration laws. However, we feel strongly that some legislation should be discussed, enacted, or changed to take these undocumented immigrant felons off our streets for good. We'd be proud to see Kate's name associated with some of this new legislation. We feel if Kate's law saves 1 daughter, 1 son, a mother, a father, Kate's death won't be in vain.
Thank you, Mr. Steinle. Now, Chief Manger.
Chairman Grassley, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. I come to you this morning representing, or as the president of the Major City Chiefs Association, which represents the largest cities in the United States. As cops, we see the good and the bad every day. We're witnesses to the immense benefits of immigration that immigration brings to our nation, but we also see the sinister side. Our priority in local law enforcement is exactly what I think you'd want and expect: the safety of our communities across the nation, and our priority should be the prevention of crime and the protection of the public that we are sworn to serve, and that's every resident of our community. In order to do our job, local law enforcement has to have the trust and confidence of the communities that we serve. If we fail, if the public or any segment of the public does not trust the police and will not come forward when we need them or when they need us. I want to talk to you this morning about the Major City Chiefs Association's policy with regard to immigration. And I want to start by making a statement. I want to be very clear. While we do not believe that local law enforcement should be saddled with the responsibility of immigration enforcement, we do believe that it is our duty to cooperate with ICE in a manner that is consistent with our duty to protect the public. To this end, we've developed a policy which I think strikes the right balance, and I'm pleased to share some of the aspects of that policy this morning. First and foremost, immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility. It is today and has always been. Local agencies cannot be expected to take on these additional duties. Secondly, we must secure our borders. Immigration is a national issue, and the federal government should first act to secure the national borders, preventing any further illegal entry into the United States. Federal agents must consistently enforce existing laws prohibiting employers from hiring undocumented workers. Our member agencies are united in their commitment to continue arresting anyone who violates criminal laws of our jurisdictions, regardless of their immigration status. Those individuals who commit criminal acts will find no safe harbor or sanctuary from the criminal violations of law within any major city, but will instead face the full force of criminal prosecution. The decisions related to how law enforcement agencies allocate their resources, direct their workforce, and define their duties to best serve and protect their communities must be left to the control of local governments. The decision to have local police officers perform the functions and duties of immigration agents should be left to local government. This shall not be mandated or forced upon them by the federal government through the threat of sanctions or withholding of existing police assistant funding. The Major City Chiefs Association supports the Priority Enforcement Program that has been developed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. DHS listened to our concerns, and they've included us in the development of this new program that includes procedures for notification to ICE by local police agencies. My own jurisdiction, Montgomery County, Maryland, serves as an example of how the new program works well. While it's not our policy to inquire or investigate immigration status, we provide electronic notification to DHS whenever we make an arrest. Likewise, we provide notification if such person in our custody is to be released. This is a model policy of the Major City Chiefs and the policy of Montgomery County. Local law enforcement is cooperating with DHS through the notification process, but not engaged in routine immigration enforcement. In our view, this notification policy represents a balance that the Judiciary Committee should consider. With recognition of immigration enforcement as a federal responsibility, we ask the committee to resist initiatives that would seek to force routine aspects of federal responsibility upon local police. Finally, regarding federal funding, federal assistance programs at the Justice Department and Homeland Security were established to strengthen criminal justice and domestic security, not to compel local agencies to perform federal duties. Their purpose was to help local police and sheriffs, not require that we take over the job of federal agencies. It is right to call upon us for actions to protect the public from crime and violence, but it's wrong to demand that we engage in matters related solely to immigration enforcement by withholding federal funds to coerce performance of federal duties by local police. This is not why these programs were established. We welcome this dialogue and commit to our partnership with this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Major. And now, Mr. McCann.
On behalf of the McCann family, I want to thank you, Senator Grassley, and the other members of the committee for this opportunity to share with you my efforts to return justice to our family after the violent death of my brother 4 years ago in about 6 weeks. Denny was crossing Kedzie Avenue on Chicago's north side to visit with a client of his. He was a commercial insurance broker. The restaurant was named El Cid's, and he and the owner would frequently dine together in the evening, and as he was crossing a walk that had that international marking, this kid, Chavez, came by drunk as a skunk and dragged him for about a block and a half and killed him. Chavez was charged with aggravated DUI, and 2 days later, ICE issued the detainer. And we went to court, a bunch of us, a family, I guess a week later for the arraignment, and they assured us, see, I didn't know anything about detainers, but they assured us that the federal government had these holes or detainers, and that no way would he be able to post bond and leave. and his bond was, what, $250,000, so we were comforted, and you can use that word, that he would be prosecuted, and a few people in the neighborhood, one a retired judge told me he'd probably get 6 to 8 years. So that's some measure of comfort that we were assured of. Well, unbeknownst to us, that summer, members of the Cook County Board, in the Cook County, and you know, they're the administrators of justice in my hometown, Chicago, they worked tirelessly without my knowledge. You know, we have this witness notification system in Illinois that's in the Constitution. Well, nobody notified me what they were doing. And they ran through an ordinance after the August recess in September without going to committee. Now, you all know how important committee work is. Well, Cook County apparently didn't in this case, and they got it passed 10-5. Well, we weren't even notified of that, nor was the prosecutor. She wasn't even aware of it. So somehow there's this lack of communication that the county passes this very important ordinance, and they don't even tell the 400, 500 assistant state's attorneys. Because the lady who was prosecuting my brother's killer was never notified. So here I am sitting at home the day, Sunday before Thanksgiving, and I get a recorded message from some kid at the jail and said that Chavez left. He posted bond and ran. And who do I call on a Sunday? You know, nobody's working. I couldn't get a hold of the prosecutor, so I got a hold of my niece, who was a deputy sheriff in the county, and she verified that, in fact, did get released, but I wasn't able to call the prosecutor the next day. Well, she immediately runs to her supervisor, and they send out a couple of cops to look for him. Well, he's gone. You know, the brother said that he never sees him and that he lives in the basement. So, you know, there are a bunch of lies were everywhere, you know. So anyhow, long story short, we also learned, and I fail to mention, this kid was prosecuted for a prior felony 2 years earlier, and he was put on probation. And ICE was never notified because Secure Communities had just gotten off the ground in 2008 or something. And so the notification, or that system that the police use, the electronic system, was, I'm going way over time here. So anyhow, long story short, we've been fighting for the last couple of years. We got a lawsuit pending. Judicial Watch is here, and they've helped us. We're before the Illinois Supreme Court currently. We work with the prior ICE guy, Morton. He was very helpful. And it's just been a pathetic miscarriage of justice visited upon my family and hundreds of other families across the country, and I'm so glad you all were able to spend some time listening to this. And all eyes are on both the Senate and the House Judiciary Committee. I'm convinced this is where a resolution rests, because these sanctuary jurisdictions are going to get away with literally murder passing these policies, and you guys got to do it. And I regret that my senator had to leave and couldn't hear my testimony, but maybe I'll talk to him later. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McCann, and Ms. Wilkerson.
Thank you for allowing me to tell the story of my son Josh and his murder. My son's name was Joshua Wilkerson. On November 16, 2010, he was beaten, strangled, tortured until he died. He was tied up, thrown in a field, and set on fire. His killer, Hermilo Morales, was brought here illegally by his illegal parents when he was 10 years old, so he fit the dream kid description. He was sentenced to life in prison, which means he'll be 30 years before he's up for parole. He'll be a 49-year-old man who I don't expect to be deported, and I just hope he doesn't come to live in your city. We had to hear this kid from the stand muttering about, in my country, never to finish that sentence. He went on to tell, we listened to him tell us repeatedly that his killing skills took over, that Josh had kicked his dog, his killing skills took over. His parents somehow managed to provide lessons that he acquired, so that he acquired a black belt in mixed martial arts. Joshua had never been in a fight in his life, very quiet, old soul. He didn't speak a lot, but when he did, you listened to him. Like I said, he'd never been in a fight in his life. So his killing skills were those martial arts that somehow his parents provided here for him. Instead of getting Joshua home that day from school, we got an autopsy report that reads in part, "This body is received in a gray body bag. There's a tag on his toe that bears the name Joshua Wilkerson. He is a white male weighing 100 pounds. He is tied up with braided rope, 13 loops around his neck with a slip knot. It goes behind his back through his back belt loop. It goes to his hands and his feet, behind his body. He has multiple fractures in his face and nasal cavity. His throat and his voice box are crushed. He was kicked so hard in the stomach that it sent his spleen into his spine and sliced it in two. So it was painful. The medical examiner said it was torture. This body has significant skin loss on his buttocks, his abdomen, his penis, his hands, and his face. He has one stick of gum and a tardy slip in his pocket. This was our family's 9/11 terrorist attack by a foreign invader, whether you want to recognize it or whether you do not. This government continues to fail or even recognize that we have an issue. Americans are dying daily at the hands of criminals that we don't even know are here. You're officially notified today there's a problem when this happens. You can't deny it any longer. You cannot stand by and ignore our families, our American families. You're elected by Americans, not any other country. You should be for Americans. If you want to sit quietly on the sidelines, you've thrown your hat into the ring already. Your silence speaks volumes. You're either for Americans or you're not. I will not give up control, another one of my children, so that a foreign person can have a nicer life. I'm not going to do it. You don't understand the pain. It's so deep in a soul, in the place that you don't even recognize you have. There aren't words to describe the pain to someone who has not gone through it. I'm not giving up another kid. Sanctuary city policies scream to the criminal element of illegals in this country. There is a criminal element. It screams to them, come to our town, USA. We'll protect you from our terrible policemen. We'll protect you from these tough American laws that you, because you had a hard life, are not able to go through the same motions that an American is. They're buying into that fact. It's going to take another life lost by a senator, a congressman, the president, even another of today's heroes, someone from Hollywood, before someone in a position moves on this. I urge you, you're in a position to do something about this for Americans. I thank you to Mr. Trump for getting a message out about the nation in 2 minutes, that for 4.5 years solidly, Maria Espinoza at the Remembrance Project and countless families like my own have been trying to say for 5 to 6 years. It feels good to be heard, whether you love him or whether you don't. I felt heard. Our family is shattered. It's shattered. It will never be the same. We'll manage. We'll go on. We function. We put on that happy face. My kids have changed, the surviving kids. Everything about us has changed. It's by the grace of God that in our broken hearts, we have a stream of memories of the loving relationship that we had with Joshua. Joshua had a very deep, intense spiritual relationship, leaving us 4 or 5 scriptures in the weeks before he died. I'm okay with where Josh is at today. It's not just about missing Josh, it's about what you're doing to an entire family, not just our immediate family, his friends, the teachers, the community, our extended family. It's incredible. I can't even explain it to you. America lost that day. You lost a good citizen that was on the brink of becoming who knows what. He had mentioned going into the Air Force like his older brother, who had to come home for 2 weeks and he was out defending this country, Americans. And we had to bring him home for 2 weeks to bury his little brother when he wasn't being defended right here at home. It's absurd to me. Thank you for your time. I do want to say, too, and just a little bit of a rebuttal about they're not scared to come here. We're inviting them. Sanctuary City says, come on down. You can have a pass in our city. You know, you're tying policemen's hands. I'm not for mandating them to ask them where they're from, but if they pull somebody over for a reason, valid cause, and they're investigating them for something, they have a right to ask them. They have a right to ask me, stop me on the freeway, where are you going, Miss Wilkerson? Where are you coming from? Do you have drugs? I'm going to answer those, and in about 15 minutes, hopefully, it'll come out the wash that I'm okay to leave. Why are you creating a class of people who seem to say we can't do that? They're not afraid to come here. They're not afraid to traipse across the desert. I've been to the border. I've stood there with border agents and watched them come across from jet skis. I'll finish quickly. Sympathy has never trumped the law in this country, ever. You sympathize with me. Can I go break a federal law? Anyone? Anyone here like to let me do that? Every one of them here threaten national security because we don't know who they are. So they are a threat. We don't know who them. They make a decision to come here. They're not scared. They're invited by sanctuary citizen policies. They're not scared to stand in line for a handout that every American here has paid into the system for our children, if need be. They mistrust police because they come from countries that mistrust police. They're not scared here. I want you to know that our family is broken forever. We are forever broken.
Thank you.
I thank you for your time, and I don't want the sympathy. I want you to do something about it. Every one of you sitting here is in a position to do something. Just throw your hat into the ring for Americans. Quit sitting silent because it's going to help you get a vote. Throw your hat into the ring and take care of American families. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your testimony. I've heard frustration and anger about our immigration policies. We can learn a lot from you about how our immigration system needs fixed, and for me, that starts with border security. Can I ask my members, because we're here for oversight of the administration, how many of you have questions that you want to ask of this panel? If none of you want to ask questions of this panel, then I will dismiss them after thanking them. Thank you all very much for coming and lending your expertise to this hearing, and I'll call the next panel.
Thank you.
Today's hearing deals with a very special issue. I trust that members of the public here will act accordingly. I want to note at the outset that the rules of the Senate prohibit outbursts, clapping, and demonstration of any kind. This includes blocking the view of people around you. Please be mindful that of those rules as we conduct the hearing, and if it isn't abided by, I of course would have to ask the Capitol Police to remove anyone who violates the rules. Before our next panel is seated, if I would ask deliver an oath. Ms. Saldana and Mr. Rodriguez, would you come, please? But before you sit, I'd like to, and before I introduce you, I'd like to ask you to affirm. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you very much. Leon Rodriguez is Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. He was confirmed by the Senate on June the 24th, 2014. Director Rodriguez was born in Brooklyn, New York, graduated from Brown University, and earned J.D. degree, Juris Doctor degree from Boston College. Sarah Saldana is Assistant Secretary for U.S. Immigration Custom Enforcement. She was confirmed by the Senate December 16th last year. She was born in Corpus Christi, Texas, graduated from Texas A&I University, and received her Juris Doctorate from Southern Methodist University. Director Rodriguez, would you please begin, and then we'll call the other director.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, members of the committee.
Okay.
In August of 1988, I was sworn in as an Assistant District Attorney in Brooklyn, New York, Kings County, New York. At the time that I was sworn in, New York City, like many other large jurisdictions throughout the country, was witnessing unprecedented crime rates. High homicide rates, high sexual assault rates, high robbery rates, high narcotics trafficking rates. It was into this environment that I started as a young 26-year-old prosecutor. Among my assignments as an assistant district attorney were homicide investigations, sex crimes special victims prosecutions, organized crime investigations and prosecutions. During my tenure as an assistant district attorney, I sat by the side of many hundreds of victims of violent crime, family members of victims of violent crime, including homicides. I witnessed the same kind of grief without limit that I saw among the crime victims' families that you saw here this morning. I witnessed the sense of profound injustice that was felt by those families. I did everything I could as an assistant district attorney to honor the oath that I had taken in August of 1988, and I have frequently remembered throughout my many years of government service, frequently remembered and felt the grief and sense of injustice that I saw in those years in Brooklyn, New York. I learned another lesson as an assistant district attorney, and that is that in law enforcement, one size does not fit all. One size fits all is the surest way to let violent criminals go free, to let the worst crimes go unaddressed. It is for that reason that there are homicide detectives who specialize in homicide. Those detectives are not asked to go and arrest the individuals who jump the turnstile at the subway. The DACA program, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, provides a way to take young people who came to this country not of their own volition, but were brought by their parents. It takes such young people who have not been convicted of a criminal offense, who do not present a threat to national security, who are not members of gangs, and who either are pursuing a course of study or have pursued a course of study, and does nothing more than to delay their deportation and to offer them work authorization. Now, let me be clear about one of the points that I made here. Those individuals are not supposed to have committed and been convicted of a prior felony, significant misdemeanors, or multiple misdemeanors, and they may not be or have been a member of a gang. Now, as several of you are well aware, there were situations in my agency where that policy was not understood. And as a result, in a small number of cases, approximately 20, individuals who were identified in law enforcement databases as gang members were afforded deferred action nonetheless. That is unacceptable. We took decisive steps to correct our procedures, to retrain our staff, to ensure that that bedrock requirement of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program was fully understood. As a result, a number of those individuals have had their deferred action terminated. In a small number of cases, we determined that the individuals actually were not gang members at all after thorough investigation. But you have my pledge that we will conduct our business at USCIS, at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, in a way that prevents gang members from ever receiving deferred action. Now, having said that, I realize the topics that we're here to talk about are important and grave ones, and I look forward to what I think is the very important dialogue that, Chairman, you have convened today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Now, Mrs. Saldana.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein, and other members of this distinguished committee. Like you all and everyone actually in this country, I am greatly moved by the stories that I've heard this morning and the tragedies that have occurred and the pain, the very palpable pain that's been inflicted on the families that we heard from today. To them, I say, I am so sorry for the loss each of you has experienced, and I know many of you have shared those condolences as well. And I say that not only as the Director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but I say it as a mother, a sister, an aunt, and a grandmother, one of my grandchildren being here today with me. I can only imagine what such a loss would be like. And I want to say that for over a decade, first as a prosecutor, then as a United States Attorney for North Texas, and now as the head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the largest law enforcement agency in the Department of Homeland Security, I am committed to do all I can to prevent violent crime. I have been, and I continue today to do so. I consider myself a law enforcement officer and have for this very several years. And while the things we did as prosecutors will not bring back the victims of any violent crime, there is some very small solace that I gained, at least, in bringing the perpetrators to justice. And I'm very proud of that work. As you know, the men and women of ICE play an integral role in public safety and in national security. Tragic situations like the ones that the family members find themselves in are deplorable and highlight the need to continue our work to focus on the apprehension and removal of convicted criminals who pose the greatest threat to public safety and national security. This is exactly what our priority enforcement program is designed to do. We spent months talking with all kinds of people from all of the stakeholders that are interested in our program, in designing it. And our objective is to take custody of dangerous individuals before they commit further crimes and before they're released into the communities. As has been said before, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We have been working across the country to bring people to the table to work with them to reach their communities and the needs of the communities when it comes to public safety. Just as Senator Feinstein has done in San Francisco, I am asking for the help of each one of you and those other members of the entire Senate to assist us in this effort to try to have jurisdictions who have not cooperated with us in the past to start doing so now. Now. And I urge you, quite frankly, as a part of all that, to help with respect to a comprehensive change to immigration law. It is complex, it is broken. These are the statutes and the codes of regulations that our folks have to deal with every day, and I implore your help in that regard. Secretary Johnson has made it clear that our borders are not open to illegal migration. As such, ICE, through our Enforcement and Removal Operations Directorate, ERO, is dedicating our resources towards the removal of individuals considered enforcement priorities. We are making some progress. Along the southwest border this year, apprehensions are down 110,000. That I see a significant positive sign, 34% from last year at this time. Likewise, our interior enforcement efforts are also paying off. Of those people detained in our detention centers, 96% of them meet our top two priorities. 76% of them meet our top priority. So I believe that our people are doing a good thing and focusing on where the focus should be in these, with respect to these hardened criminals. And you all know, of course, the enforcement work and the investigative work that our other side of the House does, Homeland Security investigations, very fine work with respect to transnational crime with very good results. And one in particular I want to point out to with respect to gang enforcement. We had an operation recently called Operation Wildfire, which netted 32,000 criminal arrests and 1,000 gang members in that particular group. Some charged with criminal offenses, of those 1,913, and it is very meaningful work as well. But I do know that we're going to focus on the enforcement and removal side, and I stand ready to take any questions of this committee.
Yeah, I thank both of you very much for being here, and most importantly, I want to thank you for coming and listening to the testimony of the first panel. I'm going to ask questions, then Senator Feinstein will, and then because the the Finance Committee's meeting on taxes upstairs, I'm going to have to turn over the meeting to Senator Sessions, if you'll do that, please. Start with you, Mr. Rodriguez, that you said that certain actions of people in your department was unacceptable in regard to DACA. And so a natural follow-up of that is somebody didn't do their job right. In this particular case, somebody probably didn't do their job right, and we know that people have died as a result of it. So then, if it's unacceptable, who's been fired or disciplined for providing DACA to gang members?
Senator, there was action taken to correct and counsel individuals who did not understand back in 2013 the proper manner in which to utilize the text database, which is the law enforcement database that identifies individual as gang members. We have undertaken extensive efforts to ensure that both the policy that very clearly excludes gang members from deferred action and the processes of our agency are fully understood. I would also add that we have run the entire population of deferred action DACA recipients back through the text database to identify all those instances where gang membership was not handled appropriately by our officers. So there has been counseling in appropriate instances.
Since there were 323, how many were changed after review?
Actually, sir, as I indicated, there were of the nearly 700,000 DACA recipients, we identified 20 cases in which an indication of gang membership appeared in the law enforcement databases for individuals who had previously received deferred action. 8 of those individuals have already been terminated. Others have been turned over to ICE for appropriate handling. Several others continue to be adjudicated. In a few cases, we actually determined that notwithstanding the identification as gang members in the database, they were not, after investigation, gang members.
What process, if any, do you have in your agency in place to learn about DACA's recipients' criminal activity in order to immediately terminate the benefit?
We obviously have ongoing contacts and discussion, above all, with ICE. We are notified in situations where individuals have either been convicted of a crime or where information is discovered that they are gang members. When we receive that information, we act on it. We're also in the middle of the DACA renewal process right now. Some individuals have been identified as being gang members during the course of that process and, of course, have been denied renewal and other appropriate action taken.
Does your agency require an interview in every DACA applicant who has a criminal record?
We do do interviews in those cases where, in order to resolve an outstanding issue, for example, one related to either criminality or gang membership, we do utilize interviews in those cases to resolve those concerns.
Ms. Saldana, in March you told the House Judiciary Committee that you supported mandatory detainers. The following day, you changed your position. Sanctuary cities, as you have heard today, do very little to protect the public safety. They're in place to protect certain groups of lawbreakers, but there are real consequences. Can you tell the family members here today, including the Steinle family, that you don't think state and local law enforcement officials should have to abide by detainers of criminal aliens?
I am not going to say that, Senator Grassley. What I am going to say is that we are working very hard with respect to a whole host, there are about 200 last time I checked, of jurisdictions, and when I say jurisdictions, I'm talking about counties, cities, all over the country who have declined to cooperate with us in the past. As the Secretary testified last week, Senator, we're making some progress. We have actually identified the top almost 50 of jurisdictions that we've had little progress with in the past couple of several months, and we're going and meeting with those local officials to try to engage them in why the PEP program is actually different from what their experience was with secured communities. You heard from some of the witnesses this morning that there is some fear out there and some concerns about even the impact on local law enforcement if there is a feeling of distrust between a community and law enforcement. So my answer, the question to me was, would it be helpful? Clarity is always helpful to law enforcement. But what I would like to do is, since we've just rolled out this program, we've been working on the design and implementation of it for months, but we just rolled out this program, I want us to be given a chance to work with folks. As U.S. Attorney, my whole existence relied on relationships with state and local law enforcement. I had to work with sheriffs, DAs, all across North Texas to try to get them to work with us, and it's a mutual cooperation. They help us, and we help them, and I'd like to continue those efforts through PEP.
Can you admit, yes or no, that sanctuary cities pose a problem to public safety?
Well, I don't know exactly what sanctuary city's definition is, but I do know, and I have said this in the past, sir, and so has the Secretary, that not cooperating with us does expose our officers to greater risks, because now they have to go out at large and try to recover some of these convicted criminals. And it's a resource expenditure much greater than it would be if we could just get these people from the jails directly into our custody and through the process.
Senator Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank the two witnesses and the very moving witnesses we heard in the prior panel. I would like to put in the record of Lopez Sanchez, because you see the felonies and you see the number of deportations, and you really see the failure of the system. So the question really comes, what to do about it? It's clear to me this man is convicted and served time in more than one state, deported 5 times, kept coming back, and this is how it ended. And it shouldn't happen that way. And maybe the price on deportation is too low, because it doesn't seem to be a deterrent at all, at least in this case. Mr. Rohnbeck said the following: ICE reported that they released 66,564 other criminal aliens back onto the streets of our country in 2013 and 14, and another 10,246 as of March 2015. This group included aliens convicted of violent and serious crimes, including homicide, sexual assault, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. And then it goes on, it says 123 Americans have been murdered by one of those released criminal aliens, including Mr. Rohnbeck's nephew. Are those numbers correct?
They are.
Okay.
They are, Senator.
Okay. Then how does it happen that of those numbers, an additional 123 Americans have been murdered by them?
How is it that that happened, or
Yes.
how is it that they came to be released?
Yes. It seems to me we've got one size fits all, that you do for the worst felon what you do for someone without that kind of record.
Well, and you've really struck on the heart of our efforts in talking to jurisdictions who have not been working with us in the recent past. We try to tell them, work with us. Let's look at your statutes. Let's look at what you've passed, and let's see if, one, we have to urge you to try to tweak it, or two, if we can work within it in whatever ordinance or legislation there is. I truly believe, in my heart of hearts, that we can bring reasonable minds to the table to work something out. And that's why we talk about one size not fitting all. It's because we're really trying to accommodate the needs of the communities that are so different, West Coast, East Coast, North and South. I come from Texas. Our problems there are not the same as the problems in California or New York or in the heartland. So that's one of the beauties of PEP, and again, I need local and state law enforcement.
Let me ask you what should happen to somebody convicted of 7 felonies in this country in a number of different states, and someone who has been deported 5 times and comes back to eventually commit a heinous crime.
And of course,
how should that be prevented?
my belief is in developing those relationships, in communication. Here, it was a 3-way law enforcement communication: the Bureau of Prisons, San Francisco Sheriff's Office, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So I'm doing all I can to try to look into, and we actually have directed my senior staff to start opening doors, and there have been some conversations already with the Bureau of Prisons, which is overseen by my old department, the Department of Justice, and to try to talk about, at least with respect to federal agency to federal agency, what we can do better. I invite your thoughts.
One last question. Supposing the sheriff did consult with you, and the city did consult with you, the record is still there. 7 felonies, 5 deportations, and he came back. And he's tried a number of different states and managed to commit felonies there too. What would happen to him? What would you do with him?
Well, we would probably, with someone with that kind of a record, we would, if he came into our custody, present him to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution.
On what?
On illegal reentry. And there are escalating punishments if you have, depending on your criminal record. And so we can do that. Right now, it's up to 20 years, depending on the nature of the person's background.
Are there cases where you have done that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Can you tell me approximately how many? Where somebody with multiple deportations and multiple felonies actually goes, based on the last deportation, to jail, to federal prison for a long time.
We present it in every occasion that those facts arise. Unfortunately, the prosecution decision isn't up to us. It's up to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They have their own priorities. I can't quibble with that, but we do present it every time we see those facts, ma'am.
Well, let me ask you, there are members here who have bills that would like to put a minimum sentence on deportation that's violated. In other words, the individual comes back. What do you think of that?
I've got to start with, quite frankly, I would like, rather than a piecemeal approach to this tremendous problem, a more comprehensive approach to reform. But if we're just looking at that, I'd like to take a look at that language and what the statute provides. This fella, in Ms. Steinle's case, actually had served several sentences for illegal reentry, and substantial, not insubstantial
Yes,
sentences.
I have-
The average sentence is 18 months to 2 years. In this case, we had 36, 56, 46 months that this individual served. Obviously, it did not deter him.
Right. My time is up. I will put in the record 2 different copies of the criminal record of Mr. Lopez Sanchez. Senator Sessions?
Thank you, Senator Feinstein, and you made some important points. I would note that San Francisco is proudly calls itself a sanctuary city. They're not hiding it. They're proud of it. They've directed their police chiefs and police officers to act in that accord, too. We are focused, I think, more today on the Sheriff's Department, who even the mayor has concluded acted improperly. I would offer for the record a letter just a week ago on behalf of the San Francisco deputy sheriffs that work for the sheriff there. And that letter to the sheriff says this: as evidenced by the tragic death of Kate Steinle on July 1st, the department's refusal to coordinate, much less cooperate with federal law enforcement agencies, recklessly compromises the safety of sworn personnel, citizens, and those who merely come to San Francisco area. This association hereby demands that the department immediately rescind the directives and comply with the statutory and contractual obligations to meet and confer in good faith. And they go over to say, moreover, it is the association's sincere belief that any changes that the department might pursue should honor Ms. Steinle's life by correcting the department's flawed philosophy so that the people of San Francisco, citizens, visitors, employees alike, are safer in the future. Ms. Saldana, you're in charge of filing the detainers and dealing with these issues. Do you agree with that letter from the deputy sheriffs of San Francisco?
I would, certainly with the essence of what the request is, and that is, let's get cooperation. Let's do what we call...
Could you put on your microphone, please?
Thank you, Senator. Let's get cooperation. Let's do what all we can to do, because we're all in the same business, and that's public safety.
Well, you're exactly right. What this is all about is protecting public safety. And isn't it a fact, Ms. Saldana, that everybody that would like to come to the United States is not entitled to be admitted on their demand?
That's why we have these statutes in the process, sir.
And you make evaluations based on people, and if they have certain risk factors, or if they get here legally or illegally, and they evidence dangerous tendencies, they can be deported.
That's certainly laid out in the statute.
And that's required in certain instances by the statute. It says they shall be deported.
There are mandatory provisions, yes, sir.
So I think that we have a serious problem here, and I believe it's directly from the top of this administration, and I believe you've been directed to carry out administration policies. And when you were asked about the sanctuary city reform, as Senator Grassley said, you said absolutely, amen, and the next day, did you have a conversation with someone and decided to change your statement on that?
As I said before, Senator, truly, my response was a straight-out law enforcement response. It is, what I did the next day was to clarify, I am not going against what we have, all our efforts in establishing and now implementing the PEP program.
Well,
we want to work with those jurisdictions. That's what I have always done, is try to set up relationships with state and
I
locals.
agree with you. You're United States Attorney, and you gave a law enforcement response, which is this is unacceptable. Every jurisdiction in America that I know of participates in a detainer policy that honors detainers from other jurisdictions. They don't ask whether the case is a good case or not. They don't retry the case. If a United States, federal, state, or local jurisdiction places a detainer hold on a prisoner, that's honored. Isn't it a historic and really unbelievable act that major cities in this country are refusing to comply with that basic requirement of law enforcement?
This is why I needed the next day to clarify, sir, that yes, we need to get there, but we've got this program that we're about to roll out, and it's all hands on deck. We can't afford not to work together in this area.
Well,
It's
what
just
if they
too
don't
dangerous.
cooperate? What if they just refuse as they refused before? Didn't your predecessor, Mr. Morton, call on Chicago, Cook County, to stop its sanctuary policies?
I'm sorry, sir, I wasn't following that. I'm not aware of
Well,
what
he
Mr.
made a
Morton
clear
did.
statement about it, and it was a call on them to change. But now the administration apparently has changed and stopped pushing it. And now after these events that have achieved so much publicity, you're beginning to talk about it again. Mr. Rodriguez, you represent the Citizens on Immigration Service, Citizenship and Immigration Service. Your council president has made a series of statements, Mr. Palinkas, he's a head official, saying, quote, USCIS adjudications officers are pressured to rubber stamp applications instead of conducting diligent case review and investigation. The culture at USCIS encourages all applications to be approved, discouraging proper investigation into red flags, and in discouraging the denial of any applications. USCIS has turned into an approval machine. He goes on to say USCIS officers who identify illegal aliens that in accordance with law should be placed into immigration removal proceedings before a federal judge are prevented from exercising their authority and responsibility. He goes on to say, Ms. Saldana, the ICE officers' morale is reported to be the lowest in the entire federal government. They filed a lawsuit against your predecessor, the Officers Association did, claiming that they are being ordered to violate their oath to enforce the law. What actions have you taken to end this and create and meet with the officers to create a system in which they are encouraged to follow the law, not violate the law?
I listen. Senator, I have been to several of our offices across the country. I wish I had time to do all of them in my first year on the job, but I do go there and I do listen. I meet with union officers. I meet with employees top to bottom, and we discuss what our mission is and how it's so important and how commonsensical it is to focus on the most heinous crimes and convicted criminals. And I get a very good response. So and by the way, I may now be a named defendant in that lawsuit. I think I've been replaced in there. So I I take those allegations seriously, and I work with our employees across the country to discuss it.
Well, I've never seen the kind of morale problems that I've seen from Mr. Palinkas' statement to you, Mr. Rodriguez, and your official actions, and you, Ms. Saldana, and your predecessor, really. This is not healthy. It's very bad, and it's a product of the trends we're seeing of non-enforcement rather than enforcement.
Thanks, Senator Sessions.
Next, there.
Senator Durbin is not here. Senator Schumer is not here. Senator Durbin.
Senator Durbin is here.
I will call on Senator Durbin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First, I was not able to stay at the hearing for Brian McCann's testimony. Brian McCann is from Chicago. I agreed to speak at an Alzheimer's Association research meeting, came back, got him on the phone. We're working with him through the FBI to try to help bring this fugitive to justice who is responsible for this terrible tragedy in his family. I want to put that on the record. Let me see if I can put some perspective on this for a minute. There seem to be 2 or 3 basic elements here that we ought to keep in mind. First is the belief of local law enforcement, that if they are called on to enforce status crimes, that is, persons who are here undocumented, that it could infringe on their ability to maintain order in a community. If every time a police car drove by, folks in a certain neighborhood thought they're looking for undocumented people, those folks are less likely to step up and cooperate with police to find real wrongdoers, real criminals, so that they be brought to justice. That seems to be a starting point I've heard over and over again. Ms. Saldana?
I agree. I've heard it also because I've met with quite a few officials, and they have a tough job. We all have a tough job. I recognize those arguments. One jurisdiction in Oregon has been sued in other jurisdictions, and in these days of tough financial budgets, I can understand why people are concerned about being exposed to constitutional challenges like they have been in some of the lawsuits.
So, what the President has proposed in both DACA and DAPA, DACA referring to young people, dreamers, who were brought here as children and are undocumented, and DAPA for those millions who are here undocumented, working, raising families and such. In both instances, the President has insisted that there be a criminal background check before they're even given a temporary permission to stay, to either live, go to school, or work. Is that not true?
Well, certainly, and my colleague, Director Rodriguez, can speak more clearly to this, but yes, that is my understanding.
And Director Rodriguez, out of 680,000 who have successfully applied for DACA status, dreamers, who were able to stay on a temporary basis for a few years and not be deported, of that number, 680,000, I am told that roughly 323, about 0.5%, have either been engaged in crime or had a criminal record to the point where they were disqualified from the DACA program. Is that close to what you've heard?
That is correct. Most of those were as a result of criminal convictions. Some of them were because of information received that they either were gang members or presented threats to national security.
So they were disqualified
Correct.
from the program.
And by the way, Senator, I would cite that as an instance where we did not rubber stamp, as
Exactly.
Mr. Palinkas, my union head, suggested, and we've certainly dug into those allegations.
And the President's proposal, when it comes to the millions who are here undocumented, they too will not only be subjected to a criminal background check before they're eligible to stay and work on a temporary basis, they're subject to review every time that permit comes up to see if they've committed a crime. Is that not true?
That is correct, Senator, and it is a multi-step process of biographic and biometric checks that are conducted on all such individuals to eliminate criminals, eliminate threats to our national security, eliminate gang members from access to those.
For the record, on both of these programs, DACA and DAPA, proposed by President Obama, there's been general opposition from the other side of the aisle. What the President has proposed for regular criminal background checks about these people living who are undocumented in America has been resisted. But that's been his starting point in each of these proposals. Yesterday, I spoke to Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security. He just visited in Chicago to meet with some of our political leaders to talk about the specific issue that brings us here today. What do we do about those who are convicted of crimes and also undocumented? And they are working now to come to an agreement through the PEP program that there be an understanding that certain levels of crime will result in a reporting. They've not reached an agreement, don't get me wrong, but they are moving in that direction. Can you explain to me the difference between a civil detainer and a criminal detainer, and whether that is significant to our conversation here?
Senator, I think I do have some insight into those distinctions based on prior positions that I've held as a federal prosecutor and also as county attorney in Montgomery County, but given that it's Director Saldana's portfolio, I think I may defer to her.
Yes, quite frankly, I'm not familiar with the distinction that way. More importantly, it seems to me that when there is a criminal case that's been presented to the United States Attorney, they've accepted it. There will be a criminal warrant and a detainer notice sent to, if the person is in somebody else's custody, and it's a court order. It is not administrative, which is the large part of what our function is. Our function is civil and administrative. There are some groups of illegal immigrants that we do refer to the U.S. attorneys for criminal prosecution, but that's only that's the only place the criminal documentation would arise.
What I'm trying to get to is this: if we are dealing with someone who is incarcerated and has been found guilty of a, let's say, serious felony, no questions asked, it's over the line, serious felony. From your point of view, what you're asking is that before they be released in their undocumented status, there be a report to your agency?
A notice.
A notice
sir,
to your
yes.
agency.
Please advise us with respect to the notification part where we've not actually established probable cause, or where we have a detainer request.
But instead of dealing with the serious felon, we are dealing with the question of illegal reentry. An illegal reentry may occur, if I'm not mistaken, someone who has been deported from the United States and attempts to return, even if there is no criminal history other than that action of returning after deportation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is right. And the U.S. attorneys across the country are not necessarily enforcing those because of their priorities. It's just too low-level an offense.
So the suggestion that we make a mandatory minimum 5-year sentence for people who have been deported and come back across the border with, let's say, with no criminal history and no other history from the government's point of view, that seems to me to be an invitation for a lot of prosecutions.
We're stretched on our resources already, and we're focusing on convicted criminals. To expand it to just illegal entries or re-entries would be a very big problem for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe Senator Lee has yielded to Senator Cruz. Good. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Senator Lee. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. The testimony we've heard today is powerful. Ms. Saldana, you are a Texan. You were a prosecutor in our state. You had a good reputation as a prosecutor. But you're serving in an administration that consistently refuses to follow the law. And we heard this morning the very real consequences of that. Now, in March, when you were testifying before the House, you were asked about sanctuary cities. Cities like San Francisco that defy federal law, and because of their defiance of federal law, Kate Steinle is no longer with us. She was murdered because of the refusal of local officials to recognize federal law. You were asked in that House hearing, should federal law compel state officials to comply with federal law? And your answer, and I want to quote verbatim, was thank you, amen, yes. Now, in my view, that was the former federal prosecutor speaking and giving an answer, and yet the next day, you issued a statement retracting what you'd said and saying, in fact, although you'd said amen, which is a pretty powerful statement from the heart, you didn't in fact mean that federal law should force local officials to comply with federal laws. I want to ask you, What political officials pressured you to change your statement?
Not a single one. This came from, the original statement came from my heart, the clarification came from my heart. And I don't mean to quibble with you, Senator, I respect you greatly, but I will say this, the question was not asked, the question was very specific. Would it be helpful for detainers to be mandatory? The law enforcement response there is clarity is always helpful. But I wanted to be sure that people were not reacting to that as an indictment of PEP or working with communities, and that's what I'm committed to do.
So let me make sure I understand your testimony correctly then. You said then it would be helpful, as in presumably helpful is good, is beneficial, is something you support. So are you saying then that ICE supports making it mandatory to comply with federal detainers?
No.
So it's helpful, but you don't support it?
Well, no, sir, I support what we have proposed and what we've been
But
spending
you just said
many
it's
hours
helpful.
on.
You
Yes,
just said
sir.
it's, but you don't support
Clarity
it.
is always helpful, but cooperation and working with our state and local partners, something I've always done, I will continue to do it, and I'm committed to see it through with respect to these jurisdictions that haven't been working with us.
It is difficult to work in an administration where you're required to take a position where, although something would be, in your own words, helpful, you nonetheless don't support it. Let me shift to a different topic. In the year 2013, how many criminal illegal aliens did the Obama administration release?
In 2014, it was a little over 30,000.
How many murderers?
In that year, sir, I can't remember the number right now, but I know that we had the statistic that was said earlier, the 4-year period from 2010 to 2014, that there were 121 persons who committed crimes afterwards. But I can't provide you this exact number.
How many rapists?
I am not sure right now. I'd have to pull that number.
How many drunk drivers?
Same answer. I can certainly break that down for you. And in fact, I think we're working on that right now. It's been requested before.
Yesterday, how many murderers did the Obama administration release?
Now, Senator, I don't know the answer to that question, but I want the American people to understand our job and our mission, if I may. We don't release people willy-nilly. We release people pursuant to these statutes and regulations. There are only a limited number of crimes that we are required to detain people. It is mandatory. They're spelled out here very clearly, many of them related to drug distribution and conspiracies. With the rest of the people, as you know very well, Zabidas requires us to release some. I think that's a small percentage of the total. Also, the immigration courts have a 500,000 case backlog. They have the proceedings they go through. They will order release because many of these folks challenge their bond or their detention. But in the rest, and I think it's like 49% this past year, in the rest where ICE has discretion, where this statute has given us discretion, we have very well-trained, very well-experienced law enforcement officers who look at the entire case just like a magistrate judge or a federal judge does.
Ms. Saldana, I want to note that your testimony here, when I ask you how many criminals ICE released in 2013, you were off by a factor of 3. You said 30,000. The correct answer is 104,000. There were 68,000 criminals, criminal illegal aliens, that ICE declined to begin deportation proceedings against, despite the fact, as Senator Sessions observed, the federal law that you're holding up there says they shall be deported. The Obama administration refused to deport them. That's 68,000. In addition to that, there were 36,000 in deportation proceedings with criminal convictions that the Obama administration released. And I would note that among those were 193 murderers with homicide convictions, were 426 people with sexual assault convictions, were over 16,000 criminal illegal aliens with drunk driving convictions released by this administration because this administration refuses to follow the law.
Sir, those numbers, I'm looking straight at them. You asked me, I thought, about 2014. That is 30,558. And the good news is, at least that went down from 2013, when it was 36,007.
But you're omitting the 68,000 criminal illegal aliens that ICE did not begin deportation proceedings against at all. And you got to add both of those together. It's over 100,000.
And yes, sir, that's absolutely right. All done pursuant to this statute that the Congress has outlined.
Now, Ms. Saldana, you heard the testimony from the victims' families. I've introduced Kate's Law in the Senate, a mandatory minimum of 5 years in prison for anyone apprehended with an illegal reentry. Does ICE support Kate's Law?
I sure would like to look at that. I haven't had a chance to. I'm not sure when it was introduced, if it has been.
It was introduced last week.
Okay. I have not had a chance to look at it. I'm sorry, Senator. But I'm certainly willing to look at any proposal along those lines and consider it and work with you if I find some objection to it.
Ms. Saldana, I will note in your opening statement here, you said after listening to the victim's family that you were so sorry for their losses. And yet the Obama administration keeps doing it. When I asked you how many murderers were released yesterday, you don't know. There is a reason the American people are upset. If President Obama had the courage of his convictions, he would come and look in the eyes of these men and women who've lost their sons, their daughters, their mothers, their sisters, their brothers, and the administration would stop releasing murderers and rapists. It is within your power to follow federal law, and this administration refuses to do so. Acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Sessions, and thank you to both you, Director, and also to you, Assistant Secretary, for your work. I also wanted to, I know Senator Grassley had to step out for another hearing, but I wanted to thank him for bringing together the first panel of witnesses. I thought their testimony was moving, and I know from being a former prosecutor how difficult it can be for victims and their families to come forward, and I'm sure some of the families are still in the room today, so I thank you for being willing to come forward today. I also wanted to thank Senator Feinstein for her frankness in the criticism of the sheriff in her own state. Clearly, there should have been cooperation, and they should have been working with ICE, and I think it's very important to remember that there are some of us that are willing to look at these policies and look at them in a way to figure out what best helps public safety. Deputy Secretary, you talked about some of the work that's being done to work with these local jurisdictions. And I listened to the head of the major city chiefs talk about their policy, which he made clear was cooperating with ICE, but clearly that didn't happen in the case in San Francisco. Are there other sheriffs and other law enforcement people have taken that position and have policies where they are not going to, and I understand the mayor said that wasn't what happened in San Francisco, but where they're not going to work with you and notify you when a repeat felon is being released?
Well, the last time I checked the number of communities that had passed some kind of ordinance or legislation, it was a little bit over 200, about 208. And
but these vary, is that correct?
Excuse me?
Or do they vary?
Oh, tremendously.
Okay, so what I'm talking here about is that I think that is the most glaring thing is this idea that someone who's been deported several times, been convicted of lengthy felonies, that there was no notification to either try to deport him or, as you've made the better point, for someone who's a repeat felon like that, bring them to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So do you know how many have that policy that was as severe as what the sheriff did in San Francisco?
Maybe a handful, maybe a handful. You know, we've identified, I think I said earlier, the top 49 which have jurisdictions who have not been cooperating with us that would have the greatest impact with respect to their immigrant populations in their communities, and we've made real progress. As the Secretary testified last week, about 33 of them have now said, over the efforts of the Secretary, the Deputy, and quite a few officials, that they will work with us in some manner. We're working with them.
It just seems like in a case like this, it should be mandatory that something gets reported to ICE, and that's what I'm trying to grapple with, and I know Senator Feinstein is.
Yeah, it's a very common sense approach, Senator. I agree with you, and I think PEP covers that. These are severe, heinous, and dangerous criminals that we are targeting, and that we're trying to work with these jurisdictions to say, can't we all agree on this category of individual and this criminal history?
Yeah, when we used to have cases, sometimes, in fact, I was just reading about one where we had convicted a man of murder. He had hacked up his wife into pieces, left her head in a bowling ball. It was a horrible case, and he was from Russia, and he's been making requests to go back to Russia. And my successor is saying no to that. And I remembered the pressure you would sometimes get, not necessarily from defendants who wouldn't care about that, but from sometimes family members. People say, oh, send them back to the other country. And I think it's an argument clearly for serving out sentences in the U.S. for public safety. But then also, you brought up the U.S. Attorney's Office, and obviously they can't handle all these cases, but when there are these serious ones with a number of felonies, I would think this should become more of a priority when it comes to these prosecutions. And has there been discussion about this with the Justice Department at all?
Yes, I've actually met with the Deputy Attorney General and discussed where we can work together to strengthen this. I've met with the Border and Immigration Security Subcommittee of the Attorney General's Advisory Committee of U.S. Attorneys, and we've discussed specifically what can you do to help us make an impact with respect to some of these cases, and they seem very interested and cooperative.
I've been a supporter of comprehensive immigration reform, and I think there's a lot of focus on things that we need for economy with that bill, and allowing, everyone from engineers on to be able to get green cards and to stop training our competition. And there's many important things in that bill, this bipartisan bill. But I think one of them, as you know, is also Director, is more money for the border, more money for enforcement, those kinds of things. Do you think that that would be helpful as well to pass some kind of comprehensive immigration reform? Either of you can answer this.
Essential. I mean,
and I'm talking about from a public safety perspective.
Yes. It's like one of these very wise victims indicated this morning, that when you hear something that simply stated, you wonder, why do we get bogged down? And that was, put aside political interests and let's get to work on a better immigration system comprehensively.
Did you want to add something?
I would like to add to that. One of the issues that we've heard about this morning is the notion that individuals who are here illegally, we don't know who they are. They're not they're not registered. They're off the grid essentially. Both what the deferred action programs and more helpfully comprehensive immigration reform provides is a way to know who those people are. To hold them accountable, to know who they are in those rare instances where they do commit crimes. So that's just one example of many where public safety would be promoted by immigration reform.
And the last thing I want to bring up is just, this is a different issue to me, and I don't want it to get scrambled into it, is the U-Visa program for victims of crime and witnesses. We've worked hard on this. I know I had many experiences where people would be preyed upon because that they thought they had power over them because a family member or something else could be deported. And the U-Visa program has been helpful in bringing cases, as one of the witnesses pointed out, who works in the domestic violence area. Could you speak to that?
I can certainly. I prosecuted human trafficking cases, and we often requested T visas. And I am happy to say that many of the victims that were involved in some of these cases actually ended up staying in the country and applying for residency and ultimately, I'm sure, citizenship, and will make extraordinary American citizens if they get to that point.
All right. Thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to both of you for coming here, for your willingness to serve our country, and your willingness to talk to us today. I believe that the great majority of those who have come to the United States in violation of our laws have probably done so for very sympathetic reasons, and have probably been living their lives in a way that, aside from the illegal manner in which they chose to enter the country, are otherwise living good lives, respectable lives. This fact does not, and I don't think ever can, vest them with the right to citizenship. And it certainly cannot override the need that we have to ensure that U.S. citizens are protected from violence, including the type of violence that might result from someone who came here who should not have come here, someone with a known criminal record who's been allowed to remain here in violation of our laws. I've spoken at length in other hearings and on the floor of the Senate about some concerns I have about the use of a legal remedy known as parole within our immigration law. For those who are not steeped in immigration law, parole is a very narrow exception, one that allows a person to enter the country temporarily. And the law governing parole within the immigration context is fairly specific. It points out that this needs to be narrow. It needs to be either for urgent humanitarian reasons on the one hand or a significant public benefit on the other hand. This temporary parole is meant to allow people to enter the country for temporary finite occasions, such as the need to get medical treatment. That would be an urgent humanitarian reason to allow someone to get parole. Or if we're talking about significant public benefit, we might add to that the hypothetical of someone needing to come in to testify as a witness in a trial. But these things are temporary and they're time sensitive. The temporary nature of parole and its narrow nature is very important. Because once you've been granted parole, if you've been paroled into the country, you've removed an otherwise present and significant legal impediment to gaining access to citizenship. And so if parole is abused, if it's granted excessively, indiscriminately, or outside of the framework of what the law allows, this, you can understand, could really create a giant gaping hole in our immigration laws. The President has cleverly, and some might say surreptitiously, spread the definition of parole wide enough to give DACA and DAPA recipients access to citizenship in circumstances in which citizenship would otherwise be not available to them. We're now seeing the President expanding that program again, expanding yet again the use of parole. First, as Vice President Biden announced in November, the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State are establishing a refugee parole program that would allow those who fail to get refugee status to enter the country under parole. I reiterate, parole is meant to be a temporary admission to get past the border on a case-by-case basis, either for urgent humanitarian reasons or for a significant public benefit. It is not a substitute for refugee status and should not be used to permanently relocate non-refugees to the United States, where refugee status isn't available. Second, the President announced in a report released just last week that the Department of Homeland Security will propose an expanded parole program for entrepreneurs. Now, entrepreneurs are valuable. We all love entrepreneurs in this country. In fact, we have a lot of programs that are designed specifically to help encourage more entrepreneurs, not just within the United States, but to come here from other countries, because we like entrepreneurs. But any program that encourages entrepreneurs to come into the United States, to this country, should be established by statute, by law, not shoehorned into a narrow exception that is meant to allow the administration to step outside the normal process only under extraordinary circumstances. So, Mr. Rodriguez, we'll start with you. Do you believe these programs are consistent with the limited intent and the temporary nature of statutory text regarding parole?
Sorry. Thank you, Senator, for that question. And the short answer is yes, I do. And I do precisely for the point that you made, which is that these are programs that are meant to be limited. They are meant to either afford a permanent immigration benefit, nor are they meant to be utilized by everybody.
So you agree with my characterization of them?
I don't agree with your characterization of the programs.
You agree that they are limited?
That is correct, that these programs are limited. So when we talk about the Central American Minors Program, it is a limited number of individuals who will be able to seek parole. There are very specific requirements, very specific circumstances which afford people that parole, and parole is, as you say, a temporary program.
Okay, so you agree that it's intended to be temporary and limited. And yet, when we look at, in the DACA application for advanced parole, there's a form called Form I-131. And it defines the statutory term significant public benefit, again, which historically was understood to refer to something like the need for someone to come into the country to testify at a trial. It defines that to include semester abroad programs and meetings with clients. Do you think that's a fair interpretation of the statute? Is it fair to shoehorn meetings with clients or semester abroad programs into significant public benefit, something intended to give somebody the right to enter the country to testify at a trial?
So understand what we're talking about when we talk about the advanced parole. These are individuals who are participants in a deferred action, not a parole program, whose ability to temporarily remain in the United States is under a deferred action program.
Okay, so if it's not a parole program, then why are you using parole for them?
That is basically the manner in which those individuals, on either a humanitarian or significant public interest basis, are able to then re-enter the United States.
Re-enter the United States?
It permits them to temporarily leave the United States and then return to the United States.
And when they return, they've had a significant impediment that would otherwise exist to their pathway to citizenship lifted.
Well, it does not make them qualified for either legal permanent resident status or for citizenship. In fact, like anybody else, they need to have an actual basis. There must be either a family member.
It's not independently adequate, but it removes an impediment that would otherwise be there, namely by virtue of the fact that they entered illegally. That would impede them from getting a green card, but for the use of parole. Isn't that right? Is that correct?
It is correct to a point, sir. The critical aspect is they need to qualify for whatever the basis is, be it for residence, for a visa, for citizenship. They need to qualify that. Advanced parole won't make them qualify.
It won't make them qualify, but it is a condition precedent, a condition without which they couldn't otherwise have gotten there. You have distorted this law. You have manipulated it beyond what the statutory text will bear, and that does cause me great concern. I see I'm over my time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lee. That's a technical but important issue. It'll be Senator Vitter, Perdue, and Tillis in that order. Senator Vitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank the full committee chairman and Senator Flake for a lot of work and cooperation with me on legislation which we want to bring forward and will be bringing forward to stop sanctuary cities policy, to put teeth in existing federal law which says that local law enforcement has to cooperate with immigration enforcement. So I thank you. You've been very active on that, and the full committee chairman and Senator Flake and others who are working with me on that. And hopefully I think we're going to move that soon in committee. Thanks to you both for your service. Ms. Saldana, the White House, through the press secretary, recently suggested that the murder of Kate Steinle was made possible because Republicans refused to pass the large immigration bill, which included an amnesty, during the last Congress. Do you agree with that?
Sir, I declined to engage in this political discussion. I'm just interested in law enforcement and making sure that the immigration laws are enforced.
Okay. Do you agree or disagree with that suggestion?
I have no opinion one way or the other. I'm focused on a very important job under the immigration laws and really would prefer to work on that and answer questions related to that than political questions. That just doesn't advance the ball for...
I agree it doesn't advance the ball, and I agree Josh Earnest's statement was insulting to a lot of people, including the victims. Let me ask you this. How is your action to block sanctuary city policy through the priority enforcement program going to be any more effective than it has been through the Secure Communities program? Obviously, it has been completely ineffective through that.
Lots of controversy, lots of litigation arising out of the secure communities. The differences are significant, particularly, I believe, as we talk to more jurisdictions, they'll see this more clearly. The distinctions are material. For example, one of the problems in that Clackamas County case was that there is no basis to detain someone at the state or local level beyond 48 hours, which was what our request was, to detain them beyond 48 hours beyond what their underlying offense called for. Under PEP, we are only asking for 48 hours notice before the release of an individual, unless we have probable cause, in which case we've got indications of a true violation with evidence that we can show the local jurisdiction. Then we ask for detaining that person the 48 hours.
And so under this new policy to try to stop these abuses from happening, first of all, I'm glad that we're finally doing this from the administration. Under this new policy, what's going to happen if and when a local jurisdiction does not comply?
Well, this is one of the things I'm considering. I, along with the victims this morning, do not want to see their lives go, without being addressed.
I hope we can all agree about that, but the bottom line is there's no consequence now. There's no teeth now. Nothing happens to these local jurisdictions. So if this is a brand new day brought on by these horrific incidents, what's going to happen to these local jurisdictions?
I'm in the middle of looking at that because, as you know, we just started implementing PEP within the last
So you don't know that
couple of
anything's
weeks.
going to happen to them?
No, we're going to work towards that, sir. I want to talk to more jurisdictions to understand exactly what the problems are with respect to their accepting our cooperating with us. And once I understand their local problems, I think I can help them better to help figure out a solution. I don't want to be one of these people that comes in and says, I'm with the federal government and I'm here to help
you. Say pretty please 3 times and they don't comply, is there going to be any negative consequence?
I'm looking at that, sir, and working with the Secretary to see what we can do with respect to that.
So you have not determined yet that there will be any negative consequence?
The program has been in effect for about 3 weeks, sir. We just started. We asked for a chance.
Well, there were some victims' families here who asked for a chance, and their chance is gone in terms of their family member. 3 weeks, this has been going on for years, and you still are not prepared to say that there is ever going to be any negative consequence to those jurisdictions. When is that going to change?
I presume when you all address comprehensive immigration reform, perhaps it can be addressed there.
Oh, now we're going to the Josh Earnest line, right?
The what, sir?
Ridiculous. Now we're going to the political line you just disavowed.
Comprehensive immigration reform, to me, is not political. It's essential legislative effort to try to get...
And absent Congress passing that bill that you and the Obama administration prefer, you don't think right now we can stop sanctuary cities from flaunting federal law? You don't think right now there can be any negative consequences when they do not properly cooperate under existing federal law with immigration enforcement?
And that's what I understand you all are working on.
Are you working on it? You have the authority to do that now.
Sir, not according to certain jurisdictions. A federal district court in Oregon, for example, has ruled against us on mandatory detainers, even citing the language that says shall. So I'm looking forward to looking at the legislation that's being proposed to address these questions. I want a solution too, sir.
Well, we've been asking to a solution for that about sanctuary cities for years. There's been absolutely no effort from the administration before. Now there's a promise of an effort, but still today, after these tragedies, you're not prepared to say that you'd support any negative consequence to sanctuary city jurisdictions if they don't properly cooperate. I eagerly await you all to finally say that, to finally say, yes, there needs to be some consequence, because that is the only way it's going to stop throughout hundreds of jurisdictions around the United States.
And Senator Vitter, I offer you my assistance if you would like my input with respect to any legislation you propose to try to resolve this or
I'm asking
advance the
for your
ball.
input right now. What should the negative consequence be that you will support?
Well, I'm hopeful that I don't have to hit somebody over the head with a federal hammer and work with these state and local jurisdictions, which have their own specific problems to address. I think you understand that, Senator, and that's why I'd like to work with you to try to address it jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Unfortunately, the biggest thing I understand is that you are not prepared today, as we speak, even after these horrible tragedies, to support a single negative consequence against a sanctuary city jurisdiction if they do not properly cooperate with immigration enforcement. That's unfortunately the biggest thing I understand. If that's incorrect, please tell me how. I'm eager to hear that.
It is incorrect.
Okay, so
I would
what
love
negative
to see
consequence will you support?
whatever you all propose with respect to legislation, I would like to work with you on it to see what we can do to help our communities as opposed to put roadblocks in their way in their community policing.
And will you tell us what you would support in that regard right now?
You know, sir, I am so focused on trying to correct the problem through our PEP program that I'd be happy to work with you with respect to any legislation you propose.
Thank you, Senator Vitter. I would note there was nothing in the Gang of Eight comprehensive bill that fixed the sanctuary city problem. It was just one of the loopholes in that legislation. Senator Perdue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank to both of you for being here today. This is a tremendously important crisis, as I would call it, not just an immigration crisis, but a national security crisis. There are only 6 reasons why 13 colonies got together in the first place. 6 reasons, and one of those was to provide for the national defense. And we heard from 6 families this morning. There are many other thousands out there who have similar experiences, including in my home state. With similar tragedies. We both got to work together and solve this thing. We heard this morning that between 2000 and 2014, that over 100 convicted criminal aliens were released and then subsequently arrested again for murder after they had been released. Those convicted criminals were in our communities because the government let them go free instead of deporting them. In 2013 alone, ICE released over 36,000 criminal illegal immigrants into American communities. These illegal aliens had almost 90,000 convictions on their records, including 193 murder convictions and over 16,000 drunk driving convictions. All told, and I know this is a debatable number, but all told, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, there are over 340,000 criminal illegal immigrants walking the streets right now. I would argue that this is a national emergency. It's absolutely outrageous, in my opinion. I don't think there are innocent parties in this debate. In 2000, my home state, we had a 16-year-old kid killed by an illegal immigrant. Today, 15 years later, the perpetrator of that crime is still at large. This is unconscionable when you hear the stories of these families, but we could bring thousands in here. It's time for us to do something. I just have a real quick question, Director Saldana, and thank you for your service in Texas and now nationally, but if you had this perpetrator in California in your custody, you had answered this question earlier. I just want to ask it again for clarity. What's ICE's policy? What are you driving in your organization? How would you have treated this particular instance where they were released back to the custody of the authorities in San Francisco?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the difference between a criminal warrant and a notice of detainer from ICE, we expect for other jurisdictions to respect the court orders that we get when we get a judicial warrant or a criminal warrant. And so
And what if they don't?
Well, that's not an issue we have when it comes to court orders. We take them to court then and say this individual, this jurisdiction has failed to honor this court order. I mean, that has teeth, right, when it's coming from a federal judge or even a local judge. And then we ask other jurisdictions to honor our criminal warrants that we get in our investigation. So to us, it's a mutual benefit, and we would honor that criminal warrant typically. Now, the Secretary testified last week on something I know he and I are going to have many more conversations about, and that is what more could be done to try to ensure that we have, where we have a jurisdiction that's not cooperating with us, that we work, in this case with the Bureau of Prisons or someone else, to try to ensure we get custody of that person.
I want to come back to Bureau of Prisons in just a second, but in that particular case, I'm a little confused because, and this is not a trick question, but I want to know that the policy is consistent in your organization about how you would have treated that particular perpetrator, because just last week, one of your senior officials inside your staff told the Judiciary Committee staff that, in their opinion, that ICE would have done exactly the same thing as the BOP did in that particular instance, and would have released that individual back into the authorities in San Francisco. Is that pretty much correct?
And that's correct, sir. Here's the deal. Here's how typically law enforcement works. We have a criminal warrant signed by a judge. We call the jurisdiction, or we see that, and we call the jurisdiction and say, is this still a live warrant, and are you going to pursue prosecution? And we work with that jurisdiction. If the answer, depending on what the answer is, we work with that jurisdiction to ensure where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck. Is it the state prosecution or the federal prosecution? And that's where that cooperation is so important, and why I truly recommend against forcing these jurisdictions, because that breaks relationships.
I'm not worried about relationships. I'm worried about results. And right now, we've got cities not adhering to federal law. And I just think that's a tremendous problem, whether it's regarding immigration or highway issues. Let me change topic just some more. We just mentioned PEP earlier. You know, we sent a letter, several senators sent a letter to Secretary Johnson a couple weeks ago. We still haven't received a response yet, by the way, but we're concerned about PEP. I really believe that, as we said to the Secretary, it's pretty clear that PEP will lead to the release of additional, maybe thousands of additional criminal aliens from federal custody. And I'm really concerned about what effect that could have, just like we heard this morning. Let me ask you this. With regard to these communities and PEP, given that these communities did not previously honor ICE detainers or cooperate with federal immigration at all, why do we have confidence that they're going to work with us on PEP? Why do we think that's going to be a better approach?
Because of the differences that we've done to the new PEP program. I mentioned one earlier, and that is we are removing the objection, the constitutional objection, that we're detaining people or asking for them to hold people without a basis. They've already completed their state or local sentence, and so now we're saying, okay, don't hold them 48 hours in the typical situation. Just give us notice of 48 hours before. We've got some differences to communicate to them and to show them. And I think they will make a difference in many cases. And I don't know, I don't remember if I shared with you, Senator, I'd like you to know this. We have identified the top 49 jurisdictions that would have the greatest impact based on their illegal populations. And 33 have already said they're going to work with us in one way or another. And 11 are still in the process of considering it. We're going to keep working that,
Okay.
and that will have a great impact.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, Director Rodriguez, I'm sorry, I'm almost out of time, but I want to talk about the Martinez case with regard to the exception relative to gang membership and the potential loophole. I mean, this seems pretty obvious to me. We talked about this in an earlier committee hearing, but I'd like to get your opinion on, isn't this just another loophole for someone to falsely claim a threat that if they were to go back home, they're under threat, therefore they should get asylum here?
It is certainly our view that you should not be able to use your prior criminality as a way to claim a particular social group. We do think that rulemaking is the right path to resolving the right way to handle this issue, and we can certainly meet Senator and talk more about solutions to the issue that you've presented.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Flake, we're going to Senator Tillis, or are you going next? Is that Senator Tillis? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Director Saldana, and Director Rodriguez. Thank you for your service. I know you've got a tough job. A lot of people have quoted some numbers, but I want to make sure that we unify around what I think are very, very important numbers. The Center for Immigration Studies estimates that there are some 347,000 criminal immigrants at large today. According to a March 2nd report, ICE Weekly Departures and Detentions report, there's 168,000 convicted criminal immigrants who had final orders of removal but are now at large in the United States. Now, in 2013, I think that Senator Perdue mentioned there were some 36,000 aliens released. Now, they represented a total of 88,000 convictions, 193 homicide convictions, including one willful killing of a police officer with a gun, 426 sexual assault convictions, 303 kidnapping convictions, 1,075 aggravated assault convictions, 1,160 stolen vehicles, 9,187 dangerous drug convictions, and 1,670 drunk or drug driving conditions. After they were released, now that's what they mounted. And by the way, that's on average, if my back of the napkin math is right, releasing someone who was convicted of a homicide some 2 or 3 times a week. Now, after these people were released, 1,000 were convicted of another crime following their release. This is a significant problem. Those stats were only for 2013. We could quote stats before and after that. It's a serious problem, and I think that it's something that the sanctuary cities need to recognize. Senator Saldana, or Director.
Quite a promotion, sir. Thank you.
I'm not sure. But I guess I'm a little bit confused with the PEP program. I understand that you're trying to work with local law enforcement. But to a certain extent, it seems to me that we are really excusing the fact that they're not really reading at least the spirit of the law, and some would say the letter. We've talked about whether or not we should pass legislation to be very specific about the mandatory requirements, and you don't want to do it. And it seems to me that a part of that is because you're concerned with the relationship damage that could be done by forcing them. Is that accurate?
Well, sir, as I said, our local law enforcement relationships are vital, not to just what we do in immigration. I mentioned Homeland Security investigations earlier. We rely on our local law enforcement partners to assist us with crime that is part of the Homeland Security investigations.
I understand that, but shame on them if they all of a sudden are not going to cooperate on these other matters of Homeland Security because we want to take a very specific and direct stand that they should obey the law. I mean, that to me is like, well, we'll do a favor here or cut them some slack so they'll work with us. That's their job. That's what they're sworn to do.
Yes, and just because I've worked here in law enforcement over a decade, I just want to be sure you understand, most of the jurisdictions work with us every day. Thank goodness they do. And let me set some context here. I think I mentioned about 200, a little over 200 jurisdictions that have passed some kind of ordinance or other legislation not to work with us. There are thousands of jurisdictions that do already. I'm very proud of my home state of Texas that has 254 jurisdictions in it, and we have very good relationships with 99.9% of those. Please do not assume that these 208 represent the total number of the vast majority of jurisdictions out there.
I understand. I do think, though, that we need to keep in mind that the numbers that I went through are significant. And each and every year, there's roughly the same sorts of numbers. This is a significant challenge, and I don't feel like for what I would consider bad actor cities, sanctuary cities, shame on them. They need to cooperate with you all. You need to be able to do your job. And they need to help you do your job, not because it's some sort of favor or accommodation, because that's their responsibility. Now, the last question that I have relates to the DACA program, and Director Rodriguez, this may be appropriate for you. I asked the Secretary when he was here if he felt certain, you're probably familiar with the Rangel Hernandez quadruple murder down in Charlotte, 20 minutes from where I live. That was someone who was granted deferred action, determined he did have some affiliation with gang violence, and he was one of the cases that I think that spurred you all's review of the other actions. Are you absolutely certain that we've scrubbed those who have received deferred action and that we don't have another Rangel Hernandez out there waiting to happen?
I'll take that as really two questions. So the first is, am I absolutely certain? I am satisfied that my staff engaged in a very thorough process of running the entire DACA cohort back through the law enforcement databases that we use to identify gang membership. I do believe that the label of gang member in that database is a reliable label, so that if the individual is identified, that gives us what we need to either deny them outright or to conduct further investigation. So that as we speak today, that does leave me with confidence that as of the date that we did that review, that we were able to address all cases of gang membership. If we have future cases where people either become gang members or commit crimes, we will address those as we have. We will terminate DACA in the manner that we have in other cases.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Flake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Saldana, in response to a letter that I sent to you along with Chairman Grassley, you mentioned that in the Altamirano case, he posted, quote, he posted $10,000 bond after his immigration hearing, which means that he became obligated to report to ICE upon demand, and that at the time of the most recent criminal offense, ICE had not triggered his obligation to report on demand. Now, he was released from custody in January of 2013. He was arrested for murder January 22nd, 2015, over 2 years. Was there any contact with ICE during that period, between ICE and Mr. Altamirano?
He was in proceedings. That's then involved, he's involved with the court, with the immigration courts. Whether ICE had some communication with him in that 2-year period, I don't know, Senator.
Do you know if the immigration court or anybody had any contact with him?
You know, I haven't looked at that specifically, sir.
Is that typical for somebody to go two full years with seemingly no contact at all?
It can happen, given the 500,000 case backlog with the immigration courts.
ICE's policy for triggering a convicted alien's obligation to report, you mentioned that you didn't see him because there was nothing that triggered an obligation to report. Has that policy been changed in terms of triggers for reporting? In light of this case and others, has there been any change?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
How many times has ICE revoked bail for those that have been put out on bail like this?
Oh, it happens with some regularity. I can't give you a percentage, but I'm happy to provide that to you for a specific period.
One thing that was just striking about this is the lack of cooperation and coordination and even notification between federal and local officials. In response to the letter that Chairman Grassley and I sent to you, you mentioned that ICE is working to implement a new initiative called the Law Enforcement Notification System, or LENS. In your testimony, you mentioned that LENS has been deployed in 11 states and full implementation is expected by the end of the year. What's stopping that from being implemented in the other 39 states?
Because we have to work with each state office that gets notices out to their counties and communities. Some, like mine, have a lot of counties. It's complex. We have to make our systems compatible to talk, and so we started with 3 states as test cases, Texas being one of them. And it worked pretty well there. We've expanded it to these 11, now to the total of 11. And there's a period of time that you have to work out kinks because we want to be sure to get this right. And that's what we've been going through right now. It's just the test program. We passed that. We now have expanded it to the 11. We're liking what we're seeing, and I think we'll be there by the end of the year.
Is this being handled with a little more urgency now?
I would like to see it done earlier than the end of the year, sir. I will stay on it, I assure you, to make sure it gets done as quickly as we possibly can.
So by the end of the year, you believe that we'll be able to say that in all 50 states we have better notification requirements?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Saldana, in Director Rodriguez's testimony, he mentioned that 43,375 new DACA requests were denied. 414 renewal requests have been denied. Of these, approximately 44,000 denied requests, how many have been deported?
Of what requests? I'm sorry, sir.
Of these, there are 43,375 DACA requests that were denied, and then 414 renewal requests have been denied. If somebody is not able to access DACA, then they are still eligible for deportation, or that is demanded. How many of those have been deported?
I can't give you the specific number, but they go in, whether they're DACA or not eligible, sir, we look at ours the same way we do anybody else. The DACA doesn't get them a free pass. We have to look at them on a case-by-case basis as to what's the next step, whether we detain someone, whether, what level of bond we place if we release them, that kind of thing. So it's all done on the whole facts and circumstances surrounding that individual, including criminal history.
But if they've done something or have an offense that makes them ineligible, you would assume that they're being looked at now. Can you give me any ballpark of how many of those have been deported, of the 44,000 DACA cases that people who were not able to access DACA?
I assure you I will get that to you, sir, as soon as I can get someone to look at it and get us an accurate number for you. I'd rather not throw out a ballpark.
Right, thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, in the case of the murder of Kate Steinle, the individual, Mr. Sanchez, was here in the country illegally. Obviously, he'd been deported 5 times. That means that he was able to come back across the border illegally 5 times. Obviously, border security is something that we're very concerned about in Arizona, and this committee is extremely concerned about. There's one program that we've had, Operation Streamline in Arizona, a secure or sure consequences program, and it's helped significantly in Yuma. We've been able to bring repeat crossings down significantly. Yet the Department of Justice seems to be now backing away from that program. What are your thoughts there?
Well, Senator, as you know, I administer the immigration benefit structure. I don't operate border security.
I understand that, but
I certainly support border security, and I'm sure Commissioner Kurlikowski would be able to address those concerns that you have, sir.
Those are serious concerns. We want to make sure the programs that we actually have working continue, and we have one that's working here in Arizona, and we're very concerned that it's not being fully implemented. The fact that Mr. Sanchez was able to so easily return across the border 5 times in the case, in California is very disturbing, but not surprising, frankly. So I thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Senator.
Thank you, Senator Flake. Well, the Streamline program, I don't think either one of you operate that, but I hope you'll fight for it, because backing away from it, as Senator Flake has said, was very much a retrograde step. We're also familiar with the 287G. Ms. Saldana, you talk about cooperating with state and local officials. Your department, Homeland Security, has dramatically weakened the 287G program, which trains local law enforcement officers how to properly and legally assist the Homeland Security in carrying out its function. Do you support the 287G, and what's the status of that?
Oh, yes. I'm not sure what you're talking about with respect to weakening. We welcome any 287G partners, and it's not that...
Well, I would ask you then to just check the records and see if there hasn't been a diminution of the 287G program, which I think should be expanded regularly.
There has been, sir, but it's not because of our not wanting that partnership. It's because jurisdictions have either withdrawn or are not coming to the table anymore.
Well, we think it could be advanced and should be. Look, what the American people know and what the family of victims of violent crime know is that this administration has consistently and steadfastly placed the goal of amnesty above the goal of public safety. Time and time and time again, that's been the fact. And you're just functionaries in that system. You've been asked to do a system, but within the rules been given by the political leaders. And it's just not right, and it's wrong. We need to do more about that, and we need to see that end. If this administration has spent 1/10 of the effort on enforcement and protecting people from crimes and punishing people who are criminals who violate our immigration laws, rather than on amnesty, we'd be a lot safer today. Many of the people that have been injured, robbed, or killed by illegal aliens would be alive today. That's just fact, and everybody knows it. So I'm concerned about it. Ms. Saldana, Chris Crane is the head of the association, the ICE Officers Association. 7,000 officers. They're the ones that filed a lawsuit against your predecessor saying that he was ordering them to carry out policies that required them to violate their oath to enforce the law. I've never heard of anything like that. The statements, Mr. Rodriguez, that your officers said, 12,000, led by Ken Palinkas, are just stunning in their criticism of supervisors and political leaders. Morale is down, and it's because we're not doing what they're paid to do, and they know it. This is what Mr. Crane says, Ms. Saldana. ICE is crumbling from within. Morale is at an all-time low as criminal aliens are released to the streets, and ICE instead takes disciplinary action against its own officers for making lawful arrests. It appears clear that federal law enforcement officers are the enemy, not those who break the laws, close quote. He goes on to say, ICE officers requested a meeting with President Obama and are still waiting. In that time, the White House has met with big business, big labor, illegal alien activists. The administration has ramped up its non-enforcement directives, putting officers and the public in danger. Every day, dangerous and violent criminal aliens are released back into our communities, close quote. That's just that's the true facts of the situation here. And you can do better if you had leadership that would let you do better. We could do so much better. We've added thousands of officers since the last dust-up in 2007 over amnesty, and we ought to be in a position that we can make real progress.
Senator, may I say something on that point?
Yes, you may.
That's one of the first things that caught my attention when I joined the agency late last year, early this year. I am putting a lot of effort in trying to engage employees and what they do. I will tell you this, though. I have met with Mr. Crane several times now. I've met with Mr. Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO as well, and to discuss their concerns, our mutual interests. And I will say, when I get out in the field, this is somewhat inconsistent with the portrayal that you've just described of our employees. They are so proud of the work they do, and they're so proud of being able to focus on criminal convicted aliens and removing them from the country, and they go about their business in a very efficient and good way, and they take pride in that. And I just want to mention that to you because that's a fact. I mean, that's what I've seen as I've traveled across the country.
I believe the facts show that this administration, in a host of ways, has failed to take strong action to help those officers do their duty and comply with their oath. Mr. Rodriguez, the Secretary Jay Johnson, your supervisor, testified recently before the House, and you said that comprehensive immigration reform, had it passed, we would know who the criminal aliens are. But that's not so well said, because I don't think anyone that has a criminal warrant out for them or has a history of criminal activities is going to register for any of these programs that you've got. In fact, Mr. Johnson admitted as much, saying most criminals do not subject themselves to criminal background checks. I agree with that. So you're not saying, are you, that if we call for people to come and register on the DACA or the President's executive amnesty, that people with criminal records are going to waltz in and file with you so they can be arrested?
Well, so let me point out a few things, Senator, Chairman, if I may. One, some have, to their detriment, even in the DACA program, some who had disqualifying criminal records did come and apply, and in many cases became the subjects of notices to appear. But part of my point also is that those who are not criminals, those who committed no other illegal act other than their illegal entry into the United States, but who are not murderers, robbers, or rapists, are now on the record, so that should they become criminals down the line, we know who they are. For the most part, I think you're right. Your ordinary criminal will not register in the manner you described. They know what the detriment is.
Well,
I would also, Senator, if I could, invite you to tour a field office with me. Because if you did that with me, you would see what I have seen, is that our officers take pride in their work. They feel empowered in their ability to do their work. And they exercise their discretion, and the chips fall where they will. Meaning that if there is a case to be denied, they do that. I've seen them do it firsthand.
Well, with regard to this DACA program and the process of providing a legal status to people in the country illegally, isn't it a fact that you've set it up so that there will not be in-person interviews for the people?
Yeah, to my point, it is...
Well, isn't it a fact that experts tell us that an in-person interview is critical to a proper evaluation of a person who's applying for legal status?
And we do in-person interviews in those cases that raise concerns that need to be investigated.
Well, how do you know if it's going to raise concern if you haven't met with them?
Because, again, another one of the things that I do is look through our files, and I know that at the time that we are reviewing a file, there is extensive information about that individual where our experienced trained officers can identify if there is the kind of information about that individual that warrants an actual...
Well, Mr. Palinkas has been very clear in his opinion on how it's going to work in the real world. And it's been set up so there'll be very few in-person interviews. And he says that denies your officers the ability to make rational choices that can protect the public safety. So I guess you just disagree with him on that.
I respectfully do.
Now, with regard to your process, is it true that over 95% of the DACA applicants have been approved, or maybe 99%?
I wouldn't be able to tell you the specific percentages, other than to say that there are a significant number who have been denied or...
So you don't know what percentage have been denied?
I couldn't, as I stand before you, other than to say that it's a substantial number who have been denied because of criminality or national security.
Would you say less than 1/2% is a substantial number?
I wouldn't say what the percentage
You don't know? I mean, you're the director of this program.
Well, what matters to me is the manner in which...
I just ask a question. What matters to me is what percentage are being denied.
Again, I couldn't tell you as I sit here before you. Again, I know that a significant number have been denied because of these kinds of issues.
Well, I'm looking at a sworn statement by Mr. Palinkas in the lawsuit in Texas that we've referred to. According to the most recent data I've seen, this is his quote under oath, quote, according to the most recent data I've seen, USCIS reports a 99.5% approval rate for all DACA applicants. The approval rate is high because USCIS leadership, prevented immigration officers from conducting case-by-case investigations of DACA applications. Leadership has intentionally stopped proper screening and enforcement. And in so doing, it has guaranteed that applications will be rubber-stamped for approval, a practice that virtually guarantees widespread fraud and places public safety at risk. So I'll ask you, does this process allow for person-to-person interviews for even a substantial minority of the
As I mentioned, when there are concerns that warrant such an interview, yes, the process does allow for it.
He goes on to say, as explained above, by routing DAPA applications through service centers instead of field offices all over the country, USCIS management has intentionally created an application process that bypasses traditional in-person investigatory interviews with trained USCIS adjudications officers. So now the way this will work, I guess somebody sends in an email or mails in a document. Is that what they do? And they're approved based on that?
Well, there is obviously a lot of information that is collected
How's the information
from the requesters. There are specific items that are required as part of the initial request. There are requests for evidence that are subsequently sent to the requesters. There is a full suite of biographic and biometric checks to examine either criminal history issues or national security issues. That forms the entirety of a file. In those cases where those raise concerns, then yes, those are referred for interview.
Well, let me show you, go further with what Mr. Palinka said under oath. For example, a new USCIS computer system to screen applications known as, quote, transformation, has proved to be a disaster, as the agency has spent upwards of $2 billion for a system that would eventually allow an alien, now referred to as a customer, under USCIS policy, as I previously stated, to upload their own information via the Internet for adjudication purposes, close quote. So it will be information sent through some $2 billion computer system by Internet, and there won't be an interview of most of the applicants. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure that, no, I really don't agree with that premise at all, Senator. A few things. One, I believe we have turned the corner on the transformation process. There is no doubt that historically there was a development approach that was not working. We recently launched the replacement green card that has gone very, very well. It actually built a number of functionalities that we're going to be able to apply to other forms. The use of electronic filing as the means of receiving and then adjudicating applications does not change which programs will have interviews associated with them. That is not set to change as part of the transformation process.
Well, look, it's not going to be an in-person interview. Mr. Palinkas has said for years now, they're overwhelmed and cannot do the kind of proper background check. You need to be defending the people's public safety. If you need more money to do this, you need to ask for it. If you want to rubber stamp the process, keep doing the way you're doing. Now, Ms. Saldana, Section 1373 of Title 8 of the U.S. Code provides, among other things, quote, a federal, state, or local government entity or official may not prohibit or in any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from ICE information regarding the citizenship or immigration status, lawful or unlawful, of any individual, close quote. Don't you think that resolutions by city councils or state governments or sheriffs in certain jurisdictions directing their officers not to honor detainers or otherwise notify ICE that they've arrested someone that's unlawfully in the country could violate or would violate Section 1373?
Well, you know, all of that is part of litigation, Senator. Quite frankly, I think we've taken that position in litigation that is the case.
That they do have to supply information. In other words, you've taken the position, which I think is, I understand you correctly, you are correct to say, cities, you have to comply with this law.
Yes, and again, is it more practical to work through all this morass of litigation, or can we work with these jurisdictions to try to get them to cooperate with us? I think it's the latter.
I understand you're saying that, but forgive me if I'm not persuaded. This has been going on for many years. It came up in 2007 when we had a debate about all of this. And it was wrong then, and it's wrong now. It's gotten to be, I think it's 300 or so jurisdictions that are sanctuary jurisdictions out of, what, 17,000 maybe? So it's, but some are very big cities. We have very large immigrant populations. And so it's a huge matter, but most cities are cooperating. And if you want to know what I hear, the complaints about the federal government enforcement from our law enforcement officers is that you won't allow them to help you. That if they arrest somebody and they call your office, nobody comes, nobody cares, nobody responds. And so that's the big problem we've got in the country, is maybe bigger than the other. But at any rate, I hope that you will understand, Ms. Saldana, that you're talking with them is not going to change the situation. Do you have any cities that have indicated to you they're going to make a change in their policy?
I mentioned the numbers earlier, sir. We're just as a matter of focus, we've looked at these 49 in particular, and 33 are working, have come and said that they will work with us in some way or another, again, tailored to their needs, and we've only had 5 that really have said of those 49, no. And we'll continue working with them.
Well, I'm sure they, after all the events of the last few months, certainly should be willing to listen about this. But I have serious doubts that we're going to see any change unless Congress takes some action or unless this administration takes some action. Ms. Saldana, one problem I know you have that I'm sure is frustrating to you is countries not taking back criminals that you've arrested and ordered deported. Can you tell us the status of that situation?
Yes, as you know, the Department of State obviously has a vast interest in this, and I have worked with the Department of State and met with the individual who oversees these relationships, and we are working very closely to try to open doors. I went to China a couple of months ago, Beijing in particular, and China has been a challenge for us. And we've signed together a kind of astounding agreement that they will actually have 2 people here to help process Chinese going back to the country who are repatriating from this country. That's some progress, but we continue to work with them. I've worked with South American countries. I visited Guatemala and El Salvador, and we are continue to work with my counterparts there to try to ensure that we have, and we actually have signed memorandum of understanding with them regarding their
Working
citizens.
with them and working with them is one thing, but this has been going on for years also, many years. How long have you been in office?
7 months.
7 months. So I can't blame you for all that's gone on
Oh, you
over
can.
the years. But I want you to know I understand that you have professional training and you understand the world. So are there powers and actions the United States government can take without legislation that would put pressure on these countries to accept back individuals who we have ordered deported?
Obviously, this is in the province of the Department of State largely because there are relationships with international countries. But yes, I understand that they have some authorities to do that. As you know, Senator, it's a very complex picture when it comes to international relationships, and one agency's issues may not hold sway over the bigger picture in the relationship with that country.
Well, I remember Senator Specter, the former chairman of this committee, a number of years ago, was outraged by all of this and actually offered legislation that would mandate reducing or mandate a reduction of visas from countries that don't comply. Doesn't it cost you a lot of money and create huge time involvements in dealing with situations where a country won't take back one of their own?
It's a great challenge, sir, and that's where we face issues under Zavidas, for example, where we can't get papers or cooperation from those countries, and we actually have to release them under that Supreme Court opinion after a certain period of time.
Under the Supreme Court opinion, if a country won't take them back and a year goes by?
Oh, I think it's actually more like 180 days. And
180 days, then you have to release them.
Well, we can extend that period of time, but there's a point at which we've got to release them.
And that takes a lot of your officers and agents' time and effort.
It does, sir.
And you have to pay to house people in high-quality prisons while you're waiting on this, instead of being able to deport them promptly.
Yes, that's correct.
I think I have a recollection, was it Mr. Von Raab, the customs chief, in years gone by, when he shut the border down with Mexico over some disagreement over their responsibilities, caused quite a stir. He just closed the border. But I would just say to you, Ms. Saldana, I think it's time for the State Department and your department to stand up and say, we're not going to accept this anymore. If you don't accept back promptly people we deport, then you're going to suffer serious consequences. And any relationship that deals in visas is a reciprocal relationship, isn't it? So that if we accept people, then they agree to take them back. And likewise, if they accept individuals from the United States and they deport them, we accept them back. Is there a law that requires that, or is that just State Department agreements with these countries?
Sir, I'm sorry, you're way above my my knowledge here when it comes to the State Department and
Well, you're going to have to stand up to the State Department. Looks like we all are. This cannot continue. We don't have the money to continue to bicker with these countries for years and years and years and not get this matter settled. So we'll try to work on that, and I think legislation would be appropriate too, although it's not necessary. If the President and the State Department stood up and were clear on it, it could be fixed promptly, in my opinion. I may submit some additional questions for the record. But we're having some problem getting answers to our records. Mr. Rodriguez, when do you plan to send us your responses to our questions for the record following the March hearing on oversight of your agency?
As soon as possible. I thought we had satisfied all of those requests. We will make sure to get those to you as soon as possible.
I don't believe we have.
Yeah, if there are outstanding requests, that is, I'm obviously not happy about that, and we will act quickly to respond, sir.
Thank you. Well, the record will remain open for 1 week, and if there's nothing further, but I will say one more thing. Both of you are good law officers. You know how the system works, and I hope you know that things aren't going as well as they should. A lot of that is because of administration policy. At some point, you'll have to decide whether you're going to execute that policy or not. Some of the policies, I think, cannot be defended. But I respect your integrity, and I appreciate your commitment to your country and your service to your country. The hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman.
thank you.